The Double Date Disaster, Do-Over Date Series, Book 2. By Susan Hatler. Chapter 1. There are certain things a person must go through to find true love, and I suppose that includes getting my car dirty, one of my major pet peeves. Living in the city, there is just something about having a clean car to zip in and out of the downtown Sacramento traffic when on my way to work, when I need to hit the mall for a new suit and heels, or when driving to the latest gallery opening. I certainly wasn't an expert, or even an amateur, at running a successful sushi restaurant, but it didn't take a lot of common sense to guess the owner shouldn't locate this sushi restaurant 30 miles outside of town on a rough, bumpy, dusty road beside a noisy river with not even one skyscraper in sight. I mean, how did the restaurant attract a long line at happy hour this way? In all fairness, maybe I just hadn't got to that specific chapter in the stack of starting your own business books, constantly growing taller on my nightstand, which could be a slim possibility considering all of my daily reading. But, still, wasn't location everything? As I drove on, I cringed at the dust flying up around my car. I swerved to avoid a divot and then a boulder in the dirt road, and then glanced at my GPS, confirming what I'd already checked on 6 times, the address Hannah had sent me for the sushi restaurant, which was indeed straight ahead. In the middle of nowhere. With no Wi-Fi. Shudder. My car vibrated as dust coated my windshield, and a strange smell, that I think some people called fresh air, seeped in from the air conditioning no matter how many buttons I jammed to stop it. I was starting to question agreeing to this double date with Hannah in the first place. But Hannah's friend Abigail Apple had met Cooper Hill, the love of her life, in an unconventional way, through email exchanges about pet adoption, so if I had to handle a few bumps along a dirty road for the possibility of finding the right guy, then, why not? Hannah had sent me the email invitation at the peak of my chaotic afternoon when my work phone had been ringing from somewhere buried under a mountain of reports, the only kind of mountain that I, Jennifer Page, ever intended to climb, that I needed to review before a meeting, which was supposed to take place in 10 minutes, 15 minutes across town. My cell phone had also chosen that moment to vibrate violently, and then launch itself straight off my desk and into a pool of sweet and sour sauce left over from the takeout spring rolls I'd half-eaten on my walk back to the office during my lunch hour, while I'd been reading the financial section of the newspaper after grabbing a coffee from Courtney Carmichael, my favorite coffee cart owner, like a marathoner accepting a cup of water, never stopping. I thought about Courtney Carmichael and her coffee cart business. She used to be an attorney who had burned out from working 24/7, and I could so relate on that burnout from working too many hours. It didn't leave much time for a social life. I guess her husband agreed because he divorced her, claiming she never made time for him. The coffee cart is Courtney's do-over in life, and she sure seemed happy with her choice. My luggage business would be my do-over, and I was so ready for the next phase. My cell phone continued to vibrate, and I lunged to reclaim it from its sticky, yet delicious, nosedive, but I accidentally knocked into the aforementioned caffeinated beverage, and it spilled across the mock-ups of another self-designed travel bag I planned to show my potential investor. It was at that moment, as I jotted down a note on the millionth hot pink sticky note of the day about changing the fabric of my new travel bag to something spill-resistant, that I glanced at my computer screen to read through Hannah's email about this double date, and potential to meet my true love. Even with my assistant rushing me along to the meeting, and even with half of my attention diverted to wiping the sweet and sour sauce off my cell phone, I was totally able to get the gist of Hannah's email: whitewater sushi, cute guy. What more could a single woman ask for? I typed a quick response with my elbow as I licked the sweet and sour off my fingers. Yay, for sure. Amen. Look, it wasn't Shakespeare, but it was effective communication. She'd get the gist. No time for editing when I was running behind, per usual. With my energy beginning to deplete, I considered slurping some of the spilled coffee off my desk for a caffeine boost, but didn't because there are lines you don't cross, even for that sweet, sweet black nectar. Plus, my assistant was watching. Instead, I printed out Hannah's email so I'd remember the time of the double date and the address of the sushi restaurant. I snatched the printed email hot off the press, shoved it into my bag, and tucked the reports under my arm before running out the door with my assistant, who was not so helpfully reminding me that we were late. Really, Lucas? Story of my life, as he well knew, and I could certainly live without his constant reminders. I'd like to point out that it wasn't always sweet and sour sauce on my cell phone. Sometimes it was Alfredo sauce from Cafe Mattia, or peanut sauce from Thai Palace on J Street, or on my try-to-be-healthy days it was light ranch from Salad Company. But without fail it was always something each and every day, some new spill, some new emergency, some new chaos. With working full-time while also trying to launch my business full-time, my schedule seemed to always be jam-packed like my shopping basket when I had a lapse in self-control and went down the snack aisle at the grocery store. Needless to say, there was little room in my life for dating, unless you consider a night at home alone with a frozen dinner, a glass of wine, and my laptop in bed a date. So I was happy to snatch up the double date with Hannah and Mr. Cute Guy, but I didn't know I'd have to drive to Siberia to get there. My stomach growled loud enough for me to hear it over the grit of the road under my tires, and I decided I needed to stop thinking about food so much. I glanced again at the GPS, which showed that I was close to my destination. Squeal! I sure hoped my date didn't expect me to delicately pick at each grain of rice on my sushi roll like a tiny little birdie, because that was so not going to happen. I was about to stuff my face. If I ever got there, anyway. A bump in the road made me bounce hard, nearly thrusting me out of my seat and rocketing my 5th shot of espresso today out of the to-go cup from Courtney. I yelped and then reached for my glove box, searching for a napkin to dab at the fresh coffee stain on my dress. Just great. I wasn't upset about the dress. I was upset because I needed that caffeine in my body, not on it. I'd been up all night working on the proposal for my potential investor and I still wasn't done. Today, I'd gone through half a tube of concealer trying to cover up the dark circles under my eyes from my all-nighter. I'd also spent too much time this morning taking off my suit and putting it back on because my sleep-deprived brain kept making me put it on backwards. But the craziness of my days, the lack of sleep, and my lack of a love life would all be worth it if I signed this investor and was able to open my own luggage store. This investor was the biggest opportunity of my life, my one road to success, so I couldn't blow it. If the investor signed, then I could quit my day job and pass the reins over to Hannah, who I believed was more than capable. Then I'd have business cards made with my business name written across the top. I'd set my own meetings and conference calls and deadlines. Instead of only selling my products through word of mouth, I'd sell my personally designed luggage in my store, in other stores, in train stations, and in airports, so they could be used by successful women like moi. The other road, of course, was failure, which was totally not acceptable. It was simply more of the same: spilled coffee, sweat stains from sprinting from conference room to conference room, acne from falling asleep with my makeup on, exhaustion from 16-hour workdays 7 days a week working at my day job and then for myself. My GPS announced that I'd arrived at my destination and I wanted to scream with joy and ask someone to point me to the shrimp tempura roll. I braked to a stop, shoved my sunglasses on top of my head and then squinted at the device on my dashboard. The glare of the late afternoon rays made it nearly impossible to read. I cupped my hand over the digital map, leaned closer and squinted. No new directions appeared and the little green dot stayed in place. I thought the destination spelled out South Fork Trailhead, which sounded like a bar where you ordered burgers and fries and light beer and sat at the bar, with the floor covered in peanut shells, next to a biker named Tiny who was, in fact, huge. It did not appear to be announcing the Whitewater sushi restaurant. Leaning in even closer to the GPS, I pressed at buttons to see what went wrong with the address as the voice announced again and again that I had already arrived to my destination. But I was still surrounded by trees and bushes and, well, dirt. Something had to be terribly wrong. "Jennifer," came a female voice from outside the car. "Jennifer!" "Hey! Hey!" My gaze darted up, but a dust cloud had kicked up from my tires and that's all I saw. I could only hope the voice was Hannah, ready for our double date, and hopefully having ordered California rolls as an appetizer. I glanced down to check myself out, which was not a good ego booster. I looked sweaty, exhausted, jittery, and covered in espresso. When my blind date caught sight of me, it seemed unlikely he would take off sprinting toward the nearest jeweler so that he could purchase a ring and then propose to me. Yes, I looked that pathetic right now. I considered shifting my car into reverse and speeding back down the country road from which I'd come. Jennifer! Is that you? Hannah's upbeat voice rang out. It's the sweaty version of me, I muttered. I opened the car door and stepped out, choking on the dust, and holding onto the frame as my stilettos wobbled on the uneven ground. Hannah stared at me with wide eyes. She wore a puffy orange vest that was not at all flattering. Interesting fashion choice. I recognized her date, Patrick, standing behind her. He wore a large green backpack and no shirt. I made a mental note to tell Hannah this man wasn't good enough for her since he was wearing swim trunks to a nice sushi restaurant. She'd only been dating him a couple weeks, so hopefully she'd move on easily. But as the dust dissipated and the scene before me became clear, I realized there was no sushi restaurant. I checked over my shoulder and saw wild grass and dirt. No sushi restaurant. There was a river and there were trees, but there was absolutely no sushi restaurant. What's going on? I asked, stepping toward Hannah. That's when I noticed one more person staring at me. I hadn't noticed him before, which was odd because now I couldn't seem to take my eyes off of him. The man's dark blue eyes assessed me and he wore an expression of confusion. It was the sort of confused expression I probably wore on my face when talking with people who say they like to hike on the weekends. Do you know what hiking is? It's walking, on purpose, outside, on purpose, uphill or mountain, on purpose. The wind tousled the guy's sandy blonde hair and I had the urge to run my fingers through those thick strands. I'd have to ask him who did his golden highlights. They looked so natural. He was tall and muscular and tanned and shirtless, which was the perfect look for an outdoorsy Ralph Lauren ad. He stood next to a plastic orange sheet and held some kind of paddle in his hand. I bit my lip and tapped my fingers against the roof of my car. I could be wrong, it was entirely possible, but I think it was fairly safe to say at this point that I may have misunderstood a little something from Hannah's email. All three of them were still silent, still unmoving, still staring. We're not having sushi? I asked, raising my eyebrows. Huh? Hannah shook her head, gesturing to the deflated plastic tub behind her. Sweetie, we're going whitewater rafting. Whitewater rafting, I repeated, numbly. A cold chill ran down my spine as her words sank in. My gaze went from Hannah, to Patrick, and then to the very hot guy with no shirt on. Whitewater rafting in high heels? Great, just great. Then I mentally snapped my fingers. Ha! I knew no self-respecting sushi businessperson would put a restaurant way out here in the middle of nowhere. Unfortunately, this also meant there were no shrimp tempura rolls in my immediate future. This double date was a complete disaster and it hadn't even started yet. Chapter 2. Hannah and I stood next to my, very dirty, car, which was shaded by a tree. The two guys, who apparently had been friends since grade school, were talking quietly nearby next to the orange plastic thing that part of me refused to believe was an actual raft, because that meant they expected me to get on said raft, which was so not appealing. I'm sorry, would you tell me one more time what we're doing out here in the middle of nowhere? I asked. At that point, the blue-eyed guy turned on a loud machine that started inflating the orange plastic thing, which started taking the shape of a raft. Shudder. The guys continued their quiet conversation, glancing over at me every few seconds. I wondered what they were saying. We're going whitewater rafting, Hannah repeated. That did not compute. What? She raised an eyebrow. Whitewater rafting. One more time. I held up a finger because her words still weren't making sense to my sleep-deprived brain. I watched Hannah's lips as if that would somehow clarify the strange words I heard as clear as this bright, hot, bug-filled, air-conditioning-less day. White. Water. Rafting, Hannah said, enunciating each word. For our double date. What happened to whitewater sushi? She shook her head. Whitewater rafting. I frowned. Whitewater. Rafting. Hannah crossed her arms. Didn't you read my email? Yes. The email clearly stated. My eyes widened and my finger popped into the air. I'd show her the email and then we could put all of this silly outdoorsy nonsense behind us. We could pack up the plastic orange thing, or just leave it, that would be my vote, plug the nearest sushi restaurant address into my GPS, and hightail it out of here before the bears and lions and wolves and Komodo dragons came out to feed on us. 15 minutes from now we would be sipping sake and laughing about the time we almost made the mistake of going whitewater rafting. I still believed in finding true love, but hoping to find it out in the middle of the woods felt like such a ridiculous notion. I have the email right here, I said, opening my purse and searching through the mess of pens, memos, file folders, and receipts from far too many late-night Thai deliveries. I printed it out, because I'm very organized, and it's in here somewhere. Hold on just a minute. I'll find it. Jennifer. I'm between organizational methods actually. That's the reason I'm having a hard time finding. Here we are. I smoothed the crumpled email out across the dusty hood of my car, careful not to burn myself against the hot metal. I scooted over to make room for Hannah to read the paper as I skimmed over it again. Just as I suspected, sushi, whitewater sushi. See, I said, pointing to the words. Do you see? Hannah rebutted, pointing to either a coffee or a teriyaki stain that covered some of the text. I'd have to lick it off to know for sure, which I was quite willing to do since I obviously wasn't going to be fed. My stomach grumbled. I was going to die out here. This was the end. And to think I'd left work early for this. Jennifer, read here. I squinted at the paper right where Hannah pointed and then held the paper up to the sun to examine it more clearly. The word starts with an R, that much is clear. Restaurant starts with an R. Relaxation starts with an R, not to mention resort and rejuvenate and Riesling all start with an R. It doesn't spell that word you said. Whitewater rafting, Hannah repeated, and I shushed her. I can see the ing at the end now, but I'm not sold that the middle letters are A and F and T. If that word had been in the email, I would have seen it like a flashing neon light, a throbbing sore thumb, or a glaring orange life vest hung in an elegant Tiffany's store window. I would have seen it and I would have declined the double date invitation. But there it was in black and white, and teriyaki. And here I was in the great, wild outdoors. Oh, Jennifer. What? I looked over at Hannah, who was clearly trying to stop herself from laughing. She already had an orange life vest on, and I knew that same horror was coming for me as well. I stared at the vest warily. I mean, you can't think I'd want to go river rafting, right? I asked, glancing beyond her shoulder at the river. We've been working together for over 2 years. You know me. I even told you about the time I went camping as a child, got stung by a bee so my arm swelled up, and then a bear passed by my tent, and for those moments I felt sure I was going to die. I avoid the outdoors like the plague. You know this about me. She shrugged. To be honest, I was a little surprised you agreed. The surprise should have caused cardiac arrest. I felt like I had to shout over the noise, plus my heart was pounding in my ribcage. Facing this fear of the outdoors was not supposed to be in the cards for me. River water crashed over boulders and white peaks before rushing away to who knows where. There are probably fish with fangs in there. What if one bites me? I shuddered. What if I get some disease and die a slow and painful death? You'll be fine. Do you think that I'd take you somewhere dangerous? This is going to be a fun double date if you just give it a chance. Hannah laced her arm through mine. Let me introduce you to Dylan. I really think you two will hit it off. Why would you think that? I'm guessing we'll have nothing in common, I whispered, as she guided me over the roots of the oak tree, total hazard to the path, toward the raft. Cringe. I get that some people like the outdoors. I just didn't happen to be one of those people. My fears might be a little out of the realm of rational, but I felt them deeply throughout every pore of my body. As if to prove the point, my stomach nodded and then rolled. I have a feeling you and Dylan will hit it off and then you'll both laugh about this someday. Hannah walked next to me in her clunky, brown boots without a problem, whereas my ankles wobbled in my tall stilettos as we walked across the dirt. As we took the last steps, Hannah opened her mouth and said, Dylan, I'd like you to meet my friend Jen. Oof! I shouted as I tripped on something, hopefully that wasn't alive, and then careened straight into the arms of my blind date. He caught me with firm hands and I lifted my head, noticing my hands splayed against his bare chest, warmed from the sun. My heart fluttered. You okay? He asked, peering down at me with those dark blue eyes. Yes, thanks, I mumbled, hoping he'd take my surely pink cheeks as an early sign of a sunburn or dehydration or whatever else someone could suffer from out in the wild, and not as complete and total humiliation, and maybe a little bit of attraction. I wasn't used to being an amateur at something, let alone walking. I needed to get a grip. I'd shaken the hands of important business leaders, CEOs, executives, and more authors of entrepreneurship self-help books than I could count, and each and every time I'd looked them confidently in the eye, given their hand a solid squeeze and a curt shake, and introduced myself clearly and smoothly. Although not one of them had made my heart flutter. I sucked in a breath, stepped back, and extended my hand. I'm Jennifer Page. His hand wrapped around mine. Dylan Douglas. I thought we were meeting at a sushi restaurant, I admitted, watching the corner of his mouth curve upward. Imagine my surprise meeting you in the middle of the woods. In that dress, he said, his eyes traveling over my body for a moment before meeting my gaze again. Something in his eyes told me I didn't look as bad as I thought. That or his vision wasn't working properly. I'd rather go with the first option, though. Yes, I said, letting out an embarrassed laugh. When I realized I was still holding his hand, I bit my bottom lip and reluctantly let go. My palm tingled where his warm skin had touched. I'm a little short on sleep and must have read Hannah's email wrong. Oops. It happens, he said, chuckling. If you didn't bring anything else to wear, I have some clothes you can borrow if you'd like. Cool. Ugh, did I just say cool? Something about staring into those blue eyes was scrambling my brain. I mean, thanks. That would be really helpful, I said, realizing I'd just committed to actually getting on the raft. Gulp. Okay, Patrick, Hannah said, taking his hand and tugging on it. Can you help me with something over here, before we get this show on the road? Huh? His eyebrows rose and she gave him a meaningful look and he nodded. Oh, yeah, sure. Jennifer, we'll be right back, she said, making it obvious she was leaving us alone on purpose. The two of them hurried away, not making much of an effort to hide their shared giggles. I suppose I couldn't blame them. I was quite the fish out of water here. Have you been whitewater rafting before? Dylan asked. Oh, all the time, I said, the motto fake it until you make it going through my brain. Surprise widened his eyes. Yeah, I wanted to tell him I was just as surprised by my answer. I'd never been whitewater, blue water, or green water rafting either. The vast majority of my experience with rafts was from watching Cast Away, where that poor little Wilson floats away. The only bright side of that movie was all of the free crab. Yum. Really? Dylan smiled, seeming happy with my response. Have you rafted here? No. The American River? Everyone's done that around here. I wanted Dylan to stop naming rivers I'd never heard of. No. No? I shook my head. I haven't been whitewater rafting before. But you said. I need caffeine, I said, realizing I didn't even care about food anymore. I think that's the origin of our current miscommunication. He grinned and winked down at me. The headwaters of our current miscommunication. My eyebrows rose. The what? His grin faded. Never mind. I nodded, wondering what to say next. I always had something to say, about anything, about everything. Why was I so tongue-tied around Dylan? Maybe because I was totally out of my element here. I shifted my weight from foot to foot as a voice inside me whispered that getting on a raft was a bad idea. But I couldn't wuss out now. Have you done other kinds of rafting? He asked. I shrugged. Nope. Canoeing? No. Kayaking? No. Paddle boarding? I shrugged. I once had a glass of wine on a bench by a lake. He nodded. Did you swim in it? I raised an eyebrow. The wine? The lake. Oh. I laughed and then cleared my throat. No. Dylan whistled and dragged his hands through his hair. I tried not to stare at his muscular arms, but wow. Rafting must be a good workout. Better than the rowing machine at the gym. Well, I'll make sure you have fun on your inaugural trip then, he said, clapping his hands together. I work with beginners all the time. Not a problem. Have you applied sunscreen yet? I raised my eyebrows. Does tinted moisturizer count? The corners of his mouth twitched. How about bug spray? I tapped my chin. Do bugs like Chanel? Chanel? No, I don't have bug spray, I said, figuring that if for some crazy reason things worked out between us, then I shouldn't expect a bottle of perfume on my birthday. Anything else I'm missing? Waterproof backpack? Mia. Not sure I even knew where to look for one. Hat? Nope. Swimsuit? Itty bitty teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini lefty in my apartment iney. I earned a side glance at that answer, which was fair enough. I was pretty sure that fear was coaxing the crazy words that were coming out of my mouth. Towel? Do coffee-stained napkins count? I asked. Sorry, no. Then negative, Captain. Okay, his mouth crept into a smile for some unknown reason. Maybe he found inept attractive? An unlikely wish. Well, did you at least bring waterproof shoes? I bit my lip. Oh, my stilettos are patent leather. They must be waterproof. If they get a few drops of water on them, they'll be just fine. It just wipes right off. My enthusiasm for my waterproof shoes waned slightly when in the ensuing silence between us I heard the roar of the river. Not exactly a small puddle on a city sidewalk. Perhaps a few drops was a teeny, tiny bit of an understatement. I looked from the gushing water crashing against the rocks to find Dylan frowning at my heels. You can't wear those on the raft, he said. You know that, right? But they're Gucci. They're pointy. What should I do with them? He pointed to my car. You have a trunk, don't you? The hot trunk of my car? I asked, cringing at the image of my warped shoes. There's not a lot of room in the dry bag, so the trunk would be best, he said, clearly not understanding his heartless answer. The trunk? The trunk? He wanted me to put my heels in the trunk? I looked between my shoes, purchased with my hard-earned money, and at Dylan, the reason I wasn't getting sushi, and wondered if I could go through with this date. You two love birds ready to get going? Hannah called, coming up behind the fully inflated orange raft. Dylan looked at me and raised his eyebrows. I tried not to let my frown take over my forehead. Wrinkles weren't a good look on me in any location, even at 27 years old. Neither Dylan nor I responded to Hannah's question, probably because the word love birds was a massive stretch considering he didn't seem to get me, or my shoes. Hannah whistled when she saw our little stare down going on. He really did have nice eyes. Well, this is clearly going well, she said. Dylan turned to Hannah. I don't think this is a good idea. She's not prepared for this and I don't want her to get hurt. Ah, that was actually considerate and also observant. Here was my get-out-of-jail-free card. Dylan was serving it up to me on a silver platter. I didn't even have to ask for it. As Hannah and Dylan discussed breaking down the gear and reloading everything into the cars, I knew I should take the offer and drive to the nearest bar. I didn't even need sushi anymore, just a glass of wine to forget this crazy afternoon. If I were smart, I would have nodded my head and agreed and thanked everyone. But apparently I wasn't very smart. Just because I haven't rafted before, doesn't mean I'm going to get hurt, I said, standing up taller, puffing out my chest and raising my chin. I'm a fast learner. We're doing this. Hannah, Patrick, and Dylan all turned to me in surprise. What's that? Hannah asked. Let's do this, I said, hardly able to believe my own ears. Patrick looked confused. You want to go rafting now? No, I didn't want to go whitewater rafting. I needed to go. Dylan thought I couldn't do this and I would prove him wrong. So I turned to Patrick. Yes, I'm going. Dylan sighed. No offense, Jennifer. But I'm trying to buy a business from this guy. City girl drowning in the river because I didn't warn her of the dangers isn't going to make him want to sell to me. That's when I realized my entire identity was at stake here. I was more than just a city girl. Wasn't I? Okay, not since that camping trip when I was a kid. But I'd been building my business for years and I was so close to getting that investor. I could do anything I put my mind to, including facing my fears. I needed to prove that to myself once and for all. I crossed my arms and was about to tap my toe in protest when I realized I shouldn't bring attention to the fact that I was wearing heels in the wilderness. It didn't exactly go toward proving my point. Instead, I just looked Dylan straight in the eye and did not blink. I am going, I said. He lifted his eyebrows. You'll wear a life vest at all times? Ugh, that ugly orange thing? Fine. You'll listen to my every instruction while we're out on the river. Yes. You'll leave the shoes in your car? I hesitated. A small smirk played at the corner of his lips. He thought he'd got me. He thought he'd won. He thought wrong. I stood on my tiptoes and put my face close to his. Absolutely, I said, hoping my pretty shoes wouldn't fry in the heated car. 10 minutes later, I was wearing Hannah's old sandals and Dylan's gym clothes, accessorized with a bright orange life vest. I greased up with Dylan's sunscreen and then slid around on the thick plastic raft like a buttered roast baking in the heat. As Dylan pushed us off from the shore and into the river, my stomach rumbled in fear and I faced the reality that I might actually drown out here. This had to be the worst double date ever. Chapter 3. The reflection of the sunlight dancing on the swirling currents of the river that we floated on wasn't exactly the same sparkle from diamonds in a Tiffany's store, but, in all honesty, it was just as captivating. Nature's beauty surrounded me and I was trying to enjoy it. I really was. I was trying so hard to convince myself the possibility of imminent death around every bend was my overactive imagination and that rafting was just as fun as whitewater sushi and a glass of sake. Pretending was a bit of an uphill battle. The sky was blue and clear above us with big, white fluffy clouds that looked like pillows nicer than any found in the fancy Jeffrey's Hotel downtown. I watched the wind rustle through the leaves of the trees lining the shore and as I listened the sound was just as soothing as the click, clack, click, click clack of my keyboard at 4 o'clock in the morning. Negative points, though, for rafting not being associated with the aroma of a freshly brewed cup of joe from Courtney's coffee cart. But if I closed my eyes and told myself I wasn't clinging on for dear life to the raft bouncing over sharp rock-infested rapids with a white-knuckled grip, I could be a big enough woman to admit that nature's fresh air was not a terrible alternative. If I didn't fear for my life, I might even have enjoyed myself. "How are you doing, Jennifer?" Dylan asked, from the center of the raft where he'd been navigating the twists and turns of the river with giant sticks I was informed are called oars. Not to be confused with a paddle, apparently. "Jennifer?" he asked. I gave a quick curt nod of my chin and fought to unclench my teeth. "Doing great," I lied, not daring to lift a finger from the ropes lining the raft to give him a thumbs up. I wasn't a mad woman, after all. "You sure?" he asked. "Totally sure," I said, unable to tell if I was nodding of my own accord or if the rhythm of the river was just bouncing me up and down. "Doing great. You're gripping the rope awfully tight." I paused. "Am I?" "Yup." "Oh, well," I laughed nervously and tried to ease up. Squinting one eye, I turned to Dylan and found his attention alternating between studying the fast-approaching, potentially deadly, rapids and watching me with an amused grin. "You're a sport," he said, giving me a look that I couldn't decipher. A ripple of pleasure rolled through me. Oh, wait. Was being a sport a good thing or a bad thing? I turned to Hannah, who smiled at me from her spot behind Dylan. "After the initial screaming, you've been so quiet I thought the river had rocked you to sleep," she said. "Nope," I said, wanting to splash her in the face for bringing up my screaming episode. No way was I letting go of the rope to do that, though, no matter how satisfying it would be. "I'm glad you're hanging out with us," she said, giving me a real smile. "Especially after the long week you've had preparing for the investor and all." "No problem," I said, trying to make my voice sound casual despite how hard it was to unclench my jaw. "I'm just enjoying the sunshine. Rafting is really not that." At that moment our raft bounced off a boulder in the middle of the river and we spun in a half circle before sliding sideways down a mini waterfall. Cold water splashed my face and I yelped as Dylan spun us back around. "Hannah," Dylan said suddenly as I gasped for breath at my near-death experience and pondered why I didn't right away before stepping a single foot inside this nightmare contraption. "Hannah, you've been whitewater rafting before, right?" Hannah nodded, expertly spinning the paddle in her grip. "This next stretch is pretty calm," he said. "Want to give the oar a try for a bit?" Hannah, always the adventurous one, whereas I am the always order the same dish at a restaurant type, jumped at the opportunity with a huge smile. "You bet." Dylan eased out of the seat and moved to a spot at the front of the raft next to me. His leg brushed mine, making me shiver, in a good way. I'd just been thinking about what the three of them would do if I joined the fish at the bottom of the river, which made my breath come in ragged gasps. but with Dylan next to me I coaxed myself to regulate my breathing, unclench my terrified jaw, and relax my rigid spine to give off the "yeah, I am super chill on this raft" vibe. I thought we were going to start talking at that point. You know, like this was actually a date and not a horrible dare that had been thrust upon me. In my dream scenario, he would ask me whether I preferred a Lake Tahoe getaway or Cabo San Lucas, and I would ask him if he liked the most recent Excel updates. He would ask me if I read that last Sacramento Living magazine with the article on the benefits of kombucha, and I would ask him if he was cool not sharing a dessert, unless he was ordering one for each of us because half a dessert is not enough. He would ask me what time it is, and I would ask him if he wanted to meet up again. He would tell me sure. He would say he'd give me a call. He never would. You know, typical first date stuff when a city girl meets an outdoor adventure guy. As Dylan dipped his paddle into the crystal clear water, I noticed he stretched out his long, tanned legs and crossed them like he was lounging in a cabana at a 5-star Hawaiian resort with a Mai Tai in his hand. Totally chill. I mimicked the relaxed posture of his body, but found myself floundering backwards, arms waving desperately in the air. Dylan noticed immediately and steadied me with a hand on my back. "Whoa, there." "Thanks," I said, slipping my feet back under the protective rope and finding that I liked the feel of his arm around me. "Man, that feels good." Dylan leaned his head back so the sun bathed his rugged, tan face glistening with warmth. "Definitely," I said, thinking I'd stumbled into a men's fragrance commercial. His eyes fluttered closed for a moment and then he sucked in a deep breath of fresh air. I watched him and his cool, easy mannerisms, and when he opened his eyes, I leaned back myself and sucked in a deep breath of that delicious, refreshing. Ugh. I squealed and coughed and waved my hands as I tried to spit out whatever bug had chosen that moment to fly straight into my mouth in front of a very hot nature guy. So attractive. Not. He wrinkled his nose. "You okay?" "Just getting some extra protein," I joked, hoping I didn't have a fly leg poking out of my mouth. I gave him what I hoped was a casual wave of my hand before wobbling to the side of the raft and quickly grabbing a hold of the rope. "I can relate." He chuckled. I actually had quite a few different bug varieties while traveling through the South Pacific. Not my favorite. I stared at him and searched my brain for something to say. Dylan and I were finally talking and relating to each other on the subject. Bugs? Eating bugs? So not romantic. "Yeah, pretty gross," I said, as his eyes held mine. After an intense moment of silence between us set to the sound of the river and the wind in the trees and Hannah and Patrick's thriving date conversation, Dylan raised the paddle out of the water and lifted his eyebrow at me. "Want to give it a try?" he asked. "Sure." I smiled and nodded, thinking I might have gone cliff diving at that moment if he'd asked me. Besides, how hard could paddling be? I'd wielded a laser pointer with pinpoint accuracy during my PowerPoint presentations. Why couldn't I wield a paddle through water? Dylan leaned closer to me and handed me the paddle. Our legs bumped together and I shifted away slightly to hide the blush across my cheeks. "Okay," Dylan said, his voice low and soft against my ear over the roar of the rapids in front of us. "Put one hand here and grip it like this. And, yeah, dip it like that. And here, just adjust it like, perfect." Dylan's hands covered mine as he guided me at maneuvering the paddle through rough spots like the rocks we bounced over. Unlike the cold water, his hands felt warm like the sun rays on the back of my neck, and firm like the wind blowing a strand of hair that had escaped my ponytail. "You've got it." He smiled down at me as I slipped the paddle back into the water. "This is fun," I said, surprising myself. A feeling of exhilaration flowed through me. We were doing it. We were on the same wavelength. We might even progress to an actual conversation that didn't involve bugs soon. This was my chance to show Dylan that I was just as cool, just as chill, just as low-key as he was in. My cell phone buzzed in my pocket and I reacted out of pure, primal city girl instinct by reaching for it to answer it. Of course, this required letting go of the paddle. Whoa, 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 Dylan called out. Cell phone securely in one hand, I tried to keep my other hand on the paddle, but the strong current ripped it from my fumbling fingers. Dylan stretched out across the raft to grab for it, but the river swept it away before he could. I gasped as it floated farther and farther out of reach. I watched it drift away, bobbing sadly along the choppy water like Wilson in Castaway. "I'm sorry," I said, grimacing. "Was that expensive?" "I'll pay for it." His expression was blank as he looked from his empty hands to the river, while my phone buzzed again and again in my hand. "Jennifer, I thought we agreed to leave the office on the shore," Hannah said, craning her head back around from watching the paddle disappear. I know, I said, remembering how I'd grabbed it out of my purse to turn it off before putting it back inside my car. But then I'd thought it wouldn't hurt to look for a Wi-Fi signal while Dylan and Patrick finished getting the raft ready, and then when I was contemplating whether it was worth it to climb a tree to find a signal, they called me. So, I slipped the phone into my pocket as I always do and forgot about it until the moment it rang and I dropped the paddle. "I'm turning it off," I said as I looked down at the screen to power it off. "Wait, it's my investor." "Now?" Hannah asked. "How are you even getting service?" "It's clearly a miracle." "I have to take this." "Sorry." There was no way I couldn't answer. Everything was riding on getting this investment. My entire business. If it were anyone else, I wouldn't have answered. But I needed to keep my potential investor happy if I wanted his investment, and that included answering whenever he called. I couldn't jeopardize my business, not even for a very cute guy. Dylan nodded toward my phone. "I get it. You have to answer." My stomach did a somersault at Dylan's encouraging smile, and I answered the phone on what I was certain was the very last ring. "This is Jennifer Page." "Hello, Ms. Page?" "This is Mr. Moore." My potential investor's voice came through the phone crackly and distant. I pressed my finger into my other ear so I could hear him better over the roar of the river. Minutes before, with Dylan's hands on mine, the river had sounded peaceful, like a gentle stream on a sunny day. Now, as I tried to hear the man who could make or break my future, it sounded like a 1,000-foot waterfall crashing down around me. "Mr. Moore," I nearly shouted into the receiver. "I'm so happy you called." "Yes, Ms. Page. I was reviewing the projections for your company and I had a few questions I'd like to discuss with you if you have a couple of minutes." Bouncing around on the raft, water spraying me in the face, a cute guy watching me and listening to my every word wasn't exactly the ideal environment for such an important conversation. Earlier, the sun had felt like a gentle warmth against my skin, but suddenly it felt like a spotlight down on me and I was melting under the pressure. "Of course," I said. "I'd love to answer any questions you have." "I'm sorry, Ms. Page?" Mr. Moore's voice was almost entirely filled with static as the raft rounded another bend in the river. "I didn't quite hear what you said." "Mr. Moore?" I shouted into the phone and moved to a different angle. "Mr. Moore, is this any better?" "Jennifer," Dylan reached for me, but I moved closer to the front of the raft and stretched my phone above my head to find the signal again. "Mr. Moore? Hello? Mr. Moore? Can you hear me?" I yelled, hearing nothing but a faint static over the thundering of the rapids. I climbed onto my knees to extend my reach. I cupped my other hand over my mouth to call up toward my phone. "Mr. Moore? Can you hear me?" "Jennifer, be careful," Dylan said, using a firm tone. "You should sit back down." "This is an important phone call for my business," I said, realizing he didn't get how important this investor was to my future. I didn't want to exist on 4 hours of sleep and a caffeine-driven day forever. Seriously, Jennifer? You should sit back down. With a sense of balance I certainly didn't have during my 2-week career as a gymnast at the age of 8, I stretched just a little bit further and was rewarded with a crackling, faint voice. Ms. Page? Hello, are you there, Ms. Page? Yes. I shouted. Yes, Mr. Moore, I'm here. Mr. Moore, This is the moment when the raft went over a particularly violent rapid, bouncing me like a springboard and popping the cell phone right out of my hand as if it were a stick of butter. I felt my eyes widen like a cartoon character's as I watched my cell phone, and my call with Mr. Moore, arc up into the bright blue sky, plummet past the dancing leaves on the trees along the shore, and then fall, at last splashing into the white rapids. In seconds my cell phone was gone. No! I yelled, leaning out over the raft and reaching my hand into the frigid water before the phone sank too far. Not smart, Jennifer. Not smart. All of a sudden my knee slipped and I found myself falling toward a sharp rock surrounded by foaming rapids. But before I had to summon up my swim lessons from the 5th grade, a strong arm wrapped around my waist and tugged me away from the water. As Dylan fell back against the inside of the raft, I fell back against his chest and lay there, gasping for breath as my heart pounded against my ugly orange life vest that I thankfully wouldn't need to rely on to keep me alive. Jennifer! Hannah called from her seat on the raft. Are you all right? Say something. I glanced over to see her eyes wide with worry, and then somehow I managed a half nod as I gulped down air that could just as easily have been gulps of river water on my way to my watery grave. Dylan had saved me, his arms still gripped securely around me, his warm hand splayed across my ribcage that was bobbing up and down with each and every breath. It's okay, Hannah, Patrick said, soothing her with a hand on her knee as if she were the one who almost fell into the river. As I gazed up at the sky, I suddenly became aware that I was still lying on top of Dylan, his black life vest firm and secure against my back. I shifted to sit up, but his strong arms stayed around me. Wait a second, he said, his voice low and calm at my ear. Catch your breath first. You're shaking. I nodded, realizing I was shaking. It must have been the adrenaline from losing my phone. Or from almost dying. Not entirely sure which one. The white, fluffy clouds passed lazily above us as we drifted down a calmer spot on the river. In Dylan's strong, protective arms, I found myself thinking less about my drowned phone and more about how nice it felt to be in his arms. Then I realized I didn't know hardly anything about him other than he was a childhood friend of Patrick's. He was strong and had excellent timing. Feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest against my back, my breathing slowed as I inhaled fresh air and found it surprisingly refreshing. I felt safe and secure right now and could easily have fallen asleep in his arms, when only an hour ago the idea of falling asleep outside would have given me nightmares. You okay, Jennifer? He asked. Yes, I finally moved to sit up, immediately missing the warmth of his arm around me. I turned to him as he sat back up on the side of the raft. Thanks, Dylan. You're welcome. I guess that was a really stupid move on my part, I said, feeling my cheeks heat under his gaze. I'm just glad you're okay, he said. Me, too. I nodded, but outside the protective cocoon of his arms the reality of the situation started to sink in. I had just completely and utterly botched a very important call with my investor. What would Mr. Moore think? What if he wouldn't give me a second chance? What if I just blew the only opportunity one had to open my own store? I found my heart rate spiking again as if I were hanging back over the roaring rapids with the violent water and sharp rocks. I needed to call Mr. Moore back. I needed to call him back right now. I turned to the couple behind us, avoiding Dylan's gaze. Does anyone have a phone? I asked. Dylan and Patrick shook their heads, while Hannah adjusted the oars before grinning and giving me a wink. We all left our phones in the car so they wouldn't fall in the river, she said. Very funny, I grumbled, my fingers tapping nervously against the side of the raft. I glanced behind Hannah and back up the river toward my sunken cell phone. You've got that I have an idea look in your eye, boss, Hannah said, narrowing her eyes suspiciously at me. I'm just wondering if... Hannah started chuckling. Your phone is gone, girl. The phone case is supposed to be waterproof, I protested, frowning at her since she seemed to not understand how badly I needed to call Mr. Moore back. If we found the cell phone and stuck it in some rice, then it would probably function well enough for me to call my investor back in. Jennifer, Hannah said, shaking her head. I get that you care about your business. But you're being unrealistic. We don't have any rice and the phone is at the bottom of the river. I bit my lip. This was my one chance. It's going to be fine, she said, when my lips started trembling. He's going to understand. There's no way he won't understand. What if he thinks I hung up on him? I tugged nervously at the straps on my life vest. He'll think I'm unprofessional, not trustworthy, and irresponsible. Who in the world would want to invest a large sum of money in someone like that? You're panicking, Jennifer. Hannah gave me a soft look. You really need to start getting more sleep because you're just assuming the worst. Please don't worry. I know he'll understand. He's going to give you the investment. Just relax. Yeah, it's not like you can control where you get signal and where you don't, Patrick said, with a shrug. He would be dumb to let one dropped call impact his decision on whether to invest or not. That makes sense. I nodded, biting my nails, a terrible habit I'd developed during my parents' divorce. I glanced at Dylan for his thoughts, but he looked hesitant, like he was debating if he should say something or not. I lifted my chin. What do you think, Dylan? Did I ruin my chances with that investor? Hannah and Patrick turned to look at him, too, the oars suspended above the water as we drifted over another smooth section of the river. Well? I prodded when he still remained silent. Finally, he said, why do you even need that guy? That was so not what I'd expected to hear. I stared at Dylan and he stared back at me, while Hannah and Patrick stared at us staring at one another. I need him to invest in my business, I said, thinking that part was obvious. So I can open my store and then quit my current day job. I've been working day and night to see this goal realized and I'm so close I can almost feel it. I can vouch that she works day and night, Hannah said. We're lucky she took the afternoon off. Leisure time is a rare occurrence for Jennifer's schedule. Well, I don't want to work 2 jobs forever, I pointed out. You have a unique product, right? Dylan asked, leaning forward and putting his elbows on his knees. Hannah said you've designed some sort of travel bag, right? I nodded. Yes. And you think it's a unique, high-quality product? It is a high-quality product. And you believe in the product? He asked, his fixed intently on mine. I nodded, unable to find words as I looked into his eyes. And you'd do anything to see it succeed? Yes. He flipped his hand over and gave a little shrug. Then what does this guy matter? I tucked my chin and looked up at him. He matters a lot. He's the investor. Not a very committed one if he walks because you're not available one afternoon when he didn't have a scheduled call, he said, making a very good point. If it's not this investor, then it's better to find out now. My heart dropped. Was it better? I mean, his logic made sense. But I'd wanted this for so long and I was so close. But if he doesn't invest in my company, then you'll find someone else, he said, holding his arms out. You're obviously very driven, since you're working while river rafting. I'm guessing one setback wouldn't slow you down. I flushed at the compliment, or maybe a little at the embarrassment that I was working when I was on a double date. I'm sorry for answering the call. He started to open his mouth. No, I really am, I said, realizing I was blowing this date, who was turning out to be a really great guy. First, my misunderstanding. Then my fear of getting eaten by a mountain lion. He raised an eyebrow. Forget I said that. I shook my head, realizing I wasn't holding anything back. You've been so patient with me. You all have. I work hard and deserve to be unplugged for a couple of hours. We all deserve a relaxing rafting trip. The corners of his mouth curved upward and my belly did a little flip. Starting now. Agreed, I said, with a determined nod. But as soon as the word came out, a knot formed in my belly. I wanted to believe what Dylan said about another investor coming along if this didn't work out. I really did. But did life really work that way? I mean, the saying chance of a lifetime didn't exactly make it sound like the great opportunities just keep on rolling. Maybe Dylan was wrong. As much as I wanted him to be right, maybe he wasn't. Mr. Moore was important. I needed his investment and I needed to answer any question he had for me, which meant I needed my cell phone. I knew where it fell into the river. Well, sort of. I knew for certain the phone case was waterproof. Well, maybe. And I knew how to swim. Okay, mostly. Laps in the swimming pool at the gym couldn't be that much different than a river with its current and fish, right? Not sure which scared me worse. Losing the investor or jumping into a fish and slime-infested river to search for a phone that had to have sunk to the bottom by now. Dylan studied my face. I wondered if he could see what crazy wheels were turning inside my head. He reached for me at the same time that I swung my leg over the edge of the raft to look down, but I froze when I heard a hissing sound. With his hand on my arm, Dylan and I looked at each other before each turning our eyes to the bottom of the raft. Water sloshed around our toes. Then our ankles. Then our mid-calves. Our double date was sinking fast. And that was no metaphor. Chapter 4. When people in movies crash on a remote island, they immediately fall to their knees and kiss the earth. But I refuse to do that because 1, it's gross, and 2, because kissing the sand of this small island was the last thing I wanted to do. What I wanted to kiss was the steering wheel of my car so I could drive back to city living. I wanted to kiss a nice glass of wine while on the patio of an upscale bar downtown. I wanted to kiss the edge of my shower and the hot, clean water that would pour over my body, which was currently drenched in river water. And most of all, I wanted to kiss the screen of my cell phone with a strong Wi-Fi signal and a full battery. None of these appealing options were happening anytime soon. So, I paced back and forth across the sand and tried to keep my panic under wraps as I watched Dylan, Patrick, and Hannah finish tugging the deflated raft onto the small island where we were currently stuck. The current of the river tried to reclaim the orange plastic and they struggled to pull it completely ashore. My hands twitched to assist, but I'd been helping earlier before I was sent to supervise because of a few minor yelps that we were going to die. Not my fault, though. If something unknown under the water turned out to be a rather large and ugly fish hadn't swum its slimy body against my legs, then I wouldn't have feared for my life and yelped. It now seemed clear to me that I should have gone to counseling over the whole childhood camping debacle. Live and learn. When the crumpled orange mess that was our raft finally arrived safely on the island, I watched Hannah collapse onto her back. Patrick plopped down next to her, his hands at his sides. Dylan dipped his toes into the shallow water and seemed to survey the small island that we hopefully wouldn't be stuck on for years like Tom Hanks in Cast Away. No ocean views here, unfortunately. The island was nothing more than a small grove of trees, a ring of sand, and a view of the seemingly innocent river, which held slimy, although admittedly not deadly, creatures beneath its tranquil ripples. "Sorry, guys," Dylan said, turning back to the crumpled raft. "I checked everything over before we left, so I'm not sure how we got the hole in the raft." Hannah craned her head back so she was grinning upside down at Dylan. "Maybe you've been a bit distracted on this trip," she said. Dylan raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" I saw her eyes flicker my way before she returned her gaze to Dylan and started laughing. "Oh, I have an idea of what could be distracting you." Patrick began to tickle her. "You have an idea about something?" "No, nothing." "Nothing at all," she said, giggling hysterically. "Stop. Please stop. We should focus on getting the raft fixed," Dylan said, kneeling and taking his pack off his shoulder. "Good idea," I said, wondering why Hannah and Patrick didn't seem to mind being stranded on a small island with no food or coffee. "We need to figure out where the puncture is," Dylan said, frowning at the raft. "You haven't located the hole?" "Maybe you are a little off your game," Patrick said, flicking his gaze from Dylan to me and then back to Dylan again. "Maybe Hannah's right that something or someone is distracting you, huh?" Hannah laughed, earning a proud little smile from Patrick, but my cheeks heated in humiliation. Were they saying that I was distracting him? That's why our raft sank and why we were trapped in the middle of a river. Maybe I am distracted. Dylan shrugged and then returned his focus to finding something in his pack. "My sister is having her baby soon, okay?" Hannah nudged Patrick playfully before saying, "Do you mean no one else is distracting you? You guys could help Dylan, you know." I gestured at them with my finger and then swirled my index finger in the direction of the raft like a magic wand. "Maybe work toward getting us off the island instead of acting ridiculous?" I tried to catch Dylan's eye, but he kept his attention focused on the towels and clean clothes and emergency medical kit and phone he was pulling out of his pack and stacking next to him. My eyes widened at the sight of his phone. I wondered if he had cell reception here, but decided it wasn't a good idea to ask right now. "That's right, Dylan," Hannah said, lounging back onto her elbows, with her toes wiggling in the sand. "I heard Felicia was on the verge of popping. Congrats, by the way." "Thanks," he replied, pulling out a small toolkit and what appeared to be 2 black pieces of plastic, and moving back toward the raft. "Will you two go make yourself useful and check the current on the other side of the island?" "Sure thing." Hannah winked at me before hopping up and dragging Patrick to his feet. They strolled along the edge of the island and soon disappeared behind the trees, leaving Dylan and me alone for the first time. Removing my life jacket with shaky fingers, I tried to figure out which made me more nervous, being stuck on an island or being left alone with a guy that I was kind of taking a liking to, even though we seemed to have nothing in common. I walked over toward him next to the raft. "Anything I can do to help?" I asked. He smiled over at me. "Want to find wood for a fire?" My eyebrows came together. "We need a fire?" "Yes, we may be here a while," he said, winking at me. "A while?" I asked, figuring Dylan had the ability to get us off this island right away. How were we supposed to survive here for a while? Surely there wasn't anything to hunt here. I squinted into the soft shade of the green leaves. "How do you trap a rabbit?" Could I even eat a rabbit? A cute, little bunny with a wiggling nose and fuzzy ears. No, I couldn't eat Thumper. Berries? I could maybe survive on berries for a while. Were there non-poisonous berries, though? My heart rate kicked up and not in a good way. "Dylan?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the miniature forest, pondering how many berries we would need to keep 4 people alive for a while. "Yeah." Do you know which berries are poisonous? Why? You looking for a snack? Yeah, I said, suddenly envisioning a new life stuck here on the small island in the center of the river. The panic finally bubbled up inside of me and I couldn't hold it back any longer. Do you think it's safe out here? What? Dylan asked, coming up next to me. I waved my arm around to indicate our complete lack of resources. I'm worried they're going to find our bones out here centuries from now and make theories about how we died. Jennifer, he reached for my hand and squeezed it. I suggested you get with just to give you something to do. I don't think we'll be stuck here until dark. Oh, I blinked, processing his little tidbit of info. Finally, a small bubble of laughter worked its way from my chest, up my throat, and then escaped my lips. So you're saying we aren't going to die? I'm panicked over nothing? Pretty much, he said, the corner of his mouth hitching up. The incredulous look he threw me made more laughter bubbles follow in an unstoppable train. Then Dylan joined in, causing me to laugh even harder until we were both bending over with laughter. I pressed my palms to my ribcage, which were totally starting to hurt, but I couldn't stop laughing. Who knew a first date could turn from disastrous to hilarious? Maybe this was my body's reaction to denial while stranded without a raft. If so, then I hoped the bubbles never stopped coming. After the laughter bubbles finally stopped, it occurred to me that we were still stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no police officers or firefighters to rescue us. We needed to form a plan to get out of here. I was good at plans. In fact, I had a template on my phone. Oh, wait, my phone was at the bottom of the river. I smacked my palm against my forehead and then promptly wished I hadn't. That light touch had hurt. Ow, did I hit my face on something? Dylan squinted at me. Nah, just a minor sunburn. A minor sunburn? I asked, knowing there was no such a thing as a minor sunburn. There was only sunburn and sunburn. Note that the words were one and the same. Sunburns bring all kinds of bad things. Skin cancer, for one. Peeling skin, for another. I probably looked like I'd aged 10 years in a day. I'm starting to recognize that look of yours, he said, raising his palms. Whoa, slow down. The burn is not that bad. I have some sunscreen. You do? Thanks, I said, liking the fact that he was prepared. The last guy I'd dated couldn't even bother to make dinner reservations on a Friday night. Hold still, he said, his fingers warm against my cheeks as he dabbed the white cream on. That sunburn must have been spreading, because I went hot all over. Better? Yes, I said, my belly doing a cartwheel. I wondered if it would be too obvious to ask for a second round of sunscreen. Shiver. You really are a city girl, aren't you? He asked, holding my gaze. Maybe a little, I said, staring back at him. The air thickened between us and I felt glad that I'd gone rafting and glad that Hannah had set me up on this double date, until I remembered I was stranded. So how do we fix the raft? He put the cap back on the tube of sunscreen and turned to look at the deflated raft. Normally, we'd patch it and then wait for the patch to dry. Normally? I forgot the patch kit in the trunk of my car, he said, his confident demeanor turning sheepish for the first time. Maybe I have been a little distracted. My belly warmed and my gaze locked with his. So it wasn't the new baby coming? He really was feeling distracted by me? I wondered if I was distracting him now. He certainly was distracting me from the peril of our situation. Bonus. I cleared my throat. What about the tool thingy you have there? He raked a hand through his hair. Yeah, that works great if you have a patch to put on the raft. Which we don't. Exactly. I pressed on my temple. There must be something else we can use to patch it. Such as... How about cutting a teensy piece off the raft for a patch? What would we do with the second hole? Right. Huh. My brain was trying to roll, but I could really use a jolt of coffee right now. Could we cut off a hunk of the life vest? They float, right? Not gonna work. The sole of a water shoe? Too thick. Palm leaves? Do you see a palm tree? Actually, no, I said, remembering we were not characters in Castaway. Just my luck to get stranded on a deserted river island instead of a tropical one. I could do tropical better. Make a hut, eat some coconuts, and get a Wilson so I don't die of loneliness while I wait for rescue. Done. Wow. He managed to infuse that single word with a whole lot of feeling. I looked at the water. How far is it to civilization? Too far to swim. You sure? I'm a strong swimmer. I've taken water yoga. He sputtered, lifting a hand to his mouth. You've taken what? I straightened my spine. Water increases the resistance. Interesting. His eyebrows remained elevated. Well, we need a patch or a different plan. I'm thinking the latter is the best option since we have no patch. I held up a finger. The first rule of survival is a backup plan. His smile was real, making him look even more handsome. Exactly. My chest filled with pride. I decided not to mention I only knew that because I'd been binge-watching a series of bad travel movies. Research for luggage sales, you know. Dylan looked back at the river. We might have to blow up the 2 inner tubes and then send Hannah and Patrick back to the start point to get the extra raft. You had an extra raft but didn't bring it? I brushed hair off my face. I thought being prepared was a good rule of survival, too. It is. Dylan dug his foot through the soil. There aren't any more big rapids. They should be fine in the tubes. When they get back here, I'll ask if they want to go get the other raft and bring it back. Otherwise, Patrick and I could do it. There didn't seem to be any other options. Except I was feeling like I should do something more to pitch in and help. I can go with Hannah to get the raft, I said. Dylan shoved his hands into his pockets. No offense, but I actually want to get off this island. None taken, I said, using my haughtiest voice. You think I'd strand you, or something? No, I think I don't have any extra paddles. My mouth dropped open. You're not going to let me live that down, are you? Definitely not something I'm going to forget, he said, but the corner of his mouth hitched up and his tone gave me the feeling he might mean he'd remember it in a good way. Interesting. Hannah and Patrick appeared from behind the trees and came toward us. The current over there's pretty rough, Hannah said. So unless we want to jump into some harsh rapids, we need to stay on the path we were on. And there are a whole lot of rocks, too, Patrick added. Exactly. Hannah nodded, without looking the least bit bothered by the situation. To be on the safe side, we have to launch from this side. How's the repair coming? I gave her a look. He forgot the patch. Totally distracted, Hannah said, grinning. Patrick smiled, too, but Dylan just turned away without admitting anything. After the sunscreen application, I was feeling more confident that I was the distraction. And it wasn't exactly a terrible feeling. We have another plan, I said, holding a finger up. Dylan turned to Hannah and Patrick. You two are going to take the extra inner tubes down the river to the takeout spot, drive up to where we put in and get the spare raft from my car. We'll be anxiously awaiting your return, I said, flopping down onto the sand. Don't forget us and leave us here to die. Hannah rolled her eyes. Thanks for that reminder, Jennifer. Now you're safe. She leaned down and gave me a quick hug before the two of them blew up the inner tubes and then headed down the river. Once they'd passed the bend and were out of sight, Dylan sat down beside me. The wind ruffled the water. I stared at the surface, bemused by the sudden change in my circumstances. Not so long before, I'd been a normal city girl. Now, I was a castaway. Are you all right? He asked. I inched into the shade, which just so happened to be closer to Dylan. I suppose. I'm sorry about the hole. At least you can't blame my Gucci heels. He smirked. No, I wouldn't dream of it. Good, I said, nudging his arm. It probably happened when we hit the rocks, he said, bending his knees and settling his arms around them. That piqued my curiosity. Have you had more dangerous things happen in your outdoor adventures? He chuckled. In a word, yes. I gawked at him. Like what? Once, when I was kayaking near the Bahamas, a shark ate half my kayak. I yanked my legs and feet up toward my chest and then gave the water a suspicious glower as though jaws were about to come out and eat me. A shark ate your kayak? Only half of it. I blurted out, Are you insane? He grinned. That depends on who you ask. I studied his face again. Why are you so into outdoor adventures when they could get you killed? I mean, hello? Shark? There is a reason, actually. He leaned back on his hands. I got sick, really sick. I thought I was going to die. My eyebrows rose. You did? Are you okay now? He raked a hand through his hair, tousling it and making him look even cuter. Yes. But I wasn't then. I found this bucket list I'd made, and it hit me that I'd never done a single thing on it. And that I might never get the chance to do a single thing on it. I couldn't imagine that. Living a life that was all, doing just what everyone said I should. Never knowing what else was out there. Never feeling like I'd really lived. I looked away. There's nothing wrong with living a nice, normal life. You mean safe. I stared at my feet. What's wrong with safe? There's no such thing. Not really. I did everything right, and I still got sick. I decided that was the universe telling me that maybe what was right for everyone else wasn't right for me. I can't imagine what that would feel like, but I'm glad you're better, I said, giving him a side glance. I live a safe life, but it suits me to a.t. I can't imagine kayaking with sharks nearby. Don't get me wrong, he said, nudging my arm a little as he chuckled. I didn't know the shark would be there or bite off my kayak. That's a bit unusual for the area. I laughed. You're saying you don't have a death wish. Quite the opposite. Ah, good to know, I said, smiling. I guess I'm lucky you're not looking to buy a skydiving company. If you had, maybe I'd be hurtling toward Earth right now instead of stuck out here in the wild. His lips quirked upward. You consider this as the wild? I shrugged. Well, it's not exactly hiking with mountain gorillas in Africa. But the closest I normally get to nature is my neighbor's plants, so. You should get out more. When I get off this island, I'm definitely going out, I said, giving him a broad smile. For sushi and wine. Maybe a nice cheese board. His shoulder nudged mine. You're afraid of fish, but you eat sushi? What are you getting at? Just making an observation. I can get you some sushi if you're hungry. I perked right up. You can? He gave me a wicked grin. Sure. I'll just whittle a spear and go get a fish or two. I'll pass, I said, unsure of whether or not he was kidding. I decided to change the subject, fast. Your sister's having a baby? Yeah, he said, a huge grin spreading across his sun-kissed cheeks. That's the whole reason I came back to the Sacramento area. Family, you know. No, I don't really know, I said, my throat tightening and surprising me. Then I shrugged. Things became messy after my parents divorced. I'm sorry. Thanks, I said, thinking about how nothing would be right with our family ever again. Our family changed in a way I never expected and didn't know how to handle. Suddenly there were strangers around. Mom dated. Dad dated. Sometimes those people had kids of their own. Holidays became a series of arguments over who was invited and who wasn't. That's gotta be hard. Doesn't exactly make me look forward to the holidays, I said, letting out a long breath. You haven't been around your family much lately, I take it. No, I haven't. I've been pretty busy, exploring the world. Did you finish your bucket list? I have one more thing to do. I rubbed my hands over my legs. What is it? Snorkeling the Silfra Fisher. I couldn't compute that. You want to snorkel with fish? Wasn't the kayak-eating shark enough sea life for you? His laughter was warm, rich. It made butterflies go wild in my belly. Not fish. Fisher. It's the opening between two tectonic plates. Tectonic plates. That must have something to do with geography. My brow wrinkled. Why would you want to do that? Because it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. He turned and faced me, his expression turning animated. It's in Iceland. I held up a hand. Did you say Iceland? As in, ice? Yes. BRRR. I can see why people would only do it once. He chuckled again. Tell me about you. What's the one thing you want to do more than anything else? That was too easy. Get this deal with my investor. His hand brushed against mine. You really care about your business. I nodded. It means everything to me. Huh. Explain everything, if you wouldn't mind. Everything, I said, feeling defensive. I want to buy a house. I need to start a retirement plan. Get my finances in order. I want stability, which sounds like the exact opposite of what you want. I wouldn't say that. My stomach let out a loud gurgle. I slapped my hands down my belly, giving him a shamefaced look. In my defense, I thought we were eating on this date. And the talk of sushi didn't help. He stood. I have an idea. Come on. I scrambled to my feet. We aren't spearing fish, are we? No. Too messy, and we don't have a fire. He held back a few low-hanging limbs of the little tree, so I could pass through. Let's see if there's anything this way. In my mind I pictured a tiki hut. With drinks. Some snacks. A swanky boat with a crew who'd be happy to help rescue us. But did we find these things? No such luck. We just kept walking. Then Dylan stopped so abruptly I ran into his back. The contact made little shivers run down my spine and I took a long step back. Snack time, he said, pointing at a bush. I surveyed the scrubby little bush and raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? There aren't any berries or anything. My forehead scrunched up. How do you know these leaves aren't poison ivy or something? They're not. He plucked a few leaves and then berries appeared. See? The berries are under the leaves. He placed a few sun-warmed berries in my palm. I gave them a suspicious stare. You said you might know a few plants. He plucked more berries. This is one I do. I gazed down at the purple-red fruit. All berries grew on bushes, right? So why did I trust them coming in a plastic bag from the grocery store, but not here? You go ahead. Don't mind if I do. He tossed a few into his mouth, chewed, and then swallowed. See? Perfectly, he paused, his hands thrusting to his throat. He choked and then flapped his arms at his sides. I screamed, threw the berries, and then Dylan burst into laughter. I'm sorry. I may have gone too far. I put my hand to my chest. What did you just do? I thought you'd think that was funny, he said. Funny? I thought you were dying. I crossed my arms, took a few steps away from him and the bush, the berries lying on the ground. His hand caught my shoulder. Whoa. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Gotcha, I said, pointing a finger at him. He caught that I was joking and then chuckled. Two can play at that game. He let out a breath. I'll admit I'm nervous about this date. It's been a while since I've dated and I've made a few mistakes today, I know. I softened instantly. At least you didn't throw in or into the water. True, he said, giving me a warm smile. That's much worse. My stomach growled as I laughed. Here. He picked some berries and passed them over to me. It's not sushi, but it will have to do for now. I popped them into my mouth. Oh, they're tart. They make a great pie. If only we had a pie pan. Flour. Sugar. I stopped there since I'd never made a pie in my life and I was just reeling off the things I figured went into one, and I'd come to the end of my knowledge banks. All we need for pie is a camp skillet, a little fire, the berries and some sugar, he said. I'm pretty sure we need an oven for a pie. I've never heard of anyone baking pie in a fire. I've made bacon and eggs in a brown paper bag over a fire. Now you're just torturing me. My hand cupped my belly again. I'll admit I'm surprised that you cook. You've done a lot of things. You're an interesting guy, Dylan. He paused. Not sure how to take that. I smiled. Take it as a compliment. Happy to, he said, slipping his hand around mine, causing my belly to do a little flip. We wandered back toward the spot where we'd originally pulled to shore. I have done some fun things, but there's so much more to do out there in the world. For some reason, the thought of him leaving for another adventure and not coming back made me a little sad. I thought you only had one item left on your bucket list, I said. You're a good listener, he said, bending down to pick up a rock. He threw it with one hand as his other hand kept hold of mine. The rock skidded on top of the water several times before finally sinking. Yes, one item left. So it's time to write a new bucket list. More adventures? I asked, and we looked at each other. The sun shone down on his hair, highlighting the sun-streaked lighter parts of it. His deep blue eyes peered into mine as he nodded. Will you ever stop? Settle down? Buy a house, get a regular job, all that jazz? A piece of a leaf lay on his shoulder, so I leaned over and took it off. Yes, that. I hadn't thought about it, he said, watching me play with the leaf between my fingers. I'm used to my life. I want to buy this whitewater rafting business so I can get more travel opportunities. I pointed out what I thought was the obvious. If you own a business, you'll have a lot of responsibility. It would be hard for you to up and leave whenever you wanted to. I have a lot of friends who'd be willing to pitch in. And adventure tour owners tend to host each other. I could go anywhere once I had that network. Networking is important. My shoulders slumped as I thought about work again. I need to start networking more. I keep trying to get in the door, but it's hard. You don't know anyone else who makes bags? I shook my head. Not like mine. That's probably a good selling point. I thought so. I glanced at the river, which made a delicate sound as it rippled. I need to talk to my investor once we get out of here. We'll be back in the city soon enough. Dylan squeezed my hand and then rocked it back and forth as the corners of his mouth lifted in an encouraging way. Good. I smiled, happy that he understood my goals. I did need that investment. I needed cash to get that business up and running, profitable. I needed the kind of connections Mr. Moore could bring to my fledgling business. He knew people, and I knew those people could help me get to right where I wanted to be. Everything would go up in smoke if I weren't careful. Dylan sat down and pulled me down beside him. His hip met mine. I didn't move away, either. The river slapped at the shore and I turned to him. What's the best thing you've ever done? I asked, wanting to get to know him more. He leaned toward me a little more, holding my hand on his and placing it on his knee. The sun highlighted the little hairs on his arm and I realized that I felt completely and totally relaxed right now. The best thing? He asked, making a humming sound. That's a tough one. There have been so many good things. If I had to choose the thing I'd do all over again, I'd say my first whitewater rafting trip. Please tell me this one wasn't it. His laughter made me smile. Then I was laughing too. No, this wasn't it. Swear. But it was on the same river. I'd been out of the hospital for about 2 months and I was finally strong enough to try what I'd always wanted to try. So, I did. I've been hooked ever since. I turned from his face to the water. That must have been a hard time in your life. Yeah. He turned his head and looked out at the water, too. I was in the hospital for a long time. Nearly a year, off and on. The doctors had given up on me. Pretty much everyone had. I'm sorry. Not everyone gets a miracle. I did. I'm glad, I whispered, noticing somehow our faces were now very close together. He smelled like soap, sunlight, and river. It was a good smell. A heady smell. His lips caught my attention. They were full and chiseled. Kissable. So very kissable. There was a slight scar on his right cheek. It was short, maybe a half-inch long, and faded. How did he get it? How about you? He asked, tucking his chin. Are you hooked on rafting now? Not on your life. He laughed. You should try it again, at least once more. I stretched my legs out in front of me. The sun had begun to fade. A cool breeze came across the water, ruffling the top of it. Worry set in. Would we have to spend the night here? His head tilted. Did you just hear something? I listened. No, wait. I think so. It sounds like someone yelling. Dylan looked at the river, his blue eyes narrowed against the setting sun's rays. I think that's them. I surged up the river until I caught sight of a raft bobbing on the water, getting closer and closer. "You're right. We're finally rescued," I said, for the first time feeling like I didn't want off the island all that badly. Dylan turned to me. "Listen, I know this date didn't go well. I'm sorry." I bit my bottom lip. "Let's just say it's been an adventure." Our eyes met. Laughter welled up again. It wasn't as long and loud as that first laugh we'd shared, but it was good. We were still laughing when Hannah jumped to shore. Patrick followed her. I'll admit it. I was almost sorry we'd been rescued so soon, even though we'd been waiting for hours. "It's time," I said, getting up and feeling a cold emptiness around my hand as Dylan let go. "Let's do this," he said, and started collecting his belongings that were strewn around the shore. I started toward the raft at a fast pace, without paying attention to the loose rocks at the edge of the shore. 1 minute I was striding all outdoors alike, and the next minute I was falling forward until I splashed face first into the water, and then under it. Water filled my nose and my mouth. A startled fish swam away from me as fast as its fins and tail would go. This time I didn't jump up or yelp. I relaxed instead, feeling the chilly water all around me as I let myself sink deeper. Suddenly, strong hands yanked me out of the water. Surprised, I came up open-mouthed and gasping as Dylan pulled me against him. "I'm fine," I said, even though I was soaked and shivering. "Fine? I thought you were drowning," he said, his voice strained as I sagged against him and toppled us over. We both went down. Our arms and legs tangled. Strong. That's what I kept thinking as my hands gripped his arms. Wow, he's really strong. Strong enough to yank me up out of the water when he thought I was in trouble. I was just... "What? What were you trying to do?" he asked. "I'm sorry," I said, able to see that I'd really scared him. "Really, Jennifer? What were you doing?" Feeling the cold river water around me. He blinked at me. "Why would you do that?" I looked into his eyes and decided to be honest. "I was trying to be adventurous, like you." He dropped his forehead to mine. "Are you serious?" I nodded, my forehead moving against his. "And guess what?" "What?" he asked, his fingertips brushing beneath my chin. For the first time in nature, I wasn't scared at all. And then the island adventure ended, not with the total humiliation I'd normally feel at sitting there shivering and soaked to the bone after my latest debacle, but with my belly fluttering as the sweetest guy I'd ever met smiled back at me. Chapter 5. On Saturday morning, I woke up, glanced at the time on my cell phone, thank goodness I'd kept my old model, and gasped. It was 20 minutes past the time I'd set on my alarm. What the? I dashed out of bed, got dressed and brushed my teeth. I'd read an article on successful entrepreneurs that said if I wanted to succeed, then I needed to develop a set-in-stone routine. I seriously tried to abide by this, but something always seemed to derail me. Like sleep. Delicious, delicious sleep. Today would be all about my business and I needed to be totally focused. I had an appointment with my real estate agent to rent a space for my store, assuming Mr. Moore invested in my company. I also needed to call Mr. Moore back today and come up with an explanation as to why our phone call ended abruptly at the bottom of a river. Obviously I'd omit that last part. I can't feel the tension mounting in my shoulders and didn't have any time to waste. Ding dong! Ding dong! My doorbell? I lifted an eyebrow. Who on earth could be here this early on a Saturday morning? I went to the door and peered through the peephole. Missy Peters? What was my stepbrother's ex-fiancée doing here? She lived in either New York City or Blue Moon Bay. I couldn't remember since she moved around so much. In fact, I'd been the one to introduce her to Kyle at a small gathering I'd hosted. Turns out Missy, who was a famous model, roomed with Hannah during their freshman year at UC Davis. Hannah brought Missy to my little shindig while Kyle was in town visiting, and the rest was history until Missy caught Kyle with her maid of honor. True story. To be honest, I kind of preferred Missy to Kyle, but I'm stuck with him since he's family. I pulled the door open. Missy? What are you doing in town? She gave me a wan smile. I know it's early. I just got off a plane and the hotel won't let me check in yet. I was hoping I could hang out for a little while. I blinked at the suitcases piled near her feet. Oh, sure. Come in. I'll make some coffee. I was halfway to the kitchen when it hit me. I turned around and banged myself in the shin with the suitcase I was rolling. Ouch, I said, thinking that never would have happened with one of my designs. Have you heard from your fiancé? Ex-fiancé. She pushed a suitcase against a wall and dropped her carry-on there as well. She gazed at me as I stared with my mouth open, but her face held a blank expression. No, we haven't decided to be friends even though he and Rebecca broke up. What can I say? I have the worst luck with guys. I'm sorry, Missy, I said, finally. I hope our breakup didn't affect our friendship. Of course not, I said, waving a hand. I can't believe I didn't say ex-fiancé. But in my defense, I was up late working and haven't had my coffee yet. Why don't I put on a pot? Sounds divine, she said, following me to the kitchen. I still can't believe Kyle blew it with you, I said, pouring the beans into the grinder and turning it on. A loud whirring sound ensued until the beans were finely ground. Actually, I can believe Kyle messed it all up. But still, he's missing out. I meant my words, too. Missy was an upbeat person, sweet and generous. My stepbrother? Well, let's just say that sometimes I wanted to give him a kick in the shins. On the other side of that, I knew exactly what made him shy away from marriage and commitment. He was there, too, when our folks got divorced. We'd thought we could count on stability for a minute there. Then Kyle got caught in the same sticky web of misery and lost chances that I'd been stuck in. But I'd believed that Missy would be the one who'd make him believe in love again. I was wrong. Thanks, Jennifer, she said, pushing the other suitcase up beside the first. I appreciate your friendship and wouldn't want that to change because he and I broke up. I wouldn't want that either. I finished preparing the coffee and started a pot. What are you going to do now? I'm going to try Sacramento for a while, she said, fingering her long dark strands. I always liked the city vibe here. Fast-paced but not New York fast, you know? I'll stay at the hotel for a little while until I decide what to do. Start over, her voice died off on the last two words. I think you made the right decision. I gave her a hug, realizing it was good to see her again. Are you sure you don't mind my hanging out here until my room is ready? Missy asked, watching the coffee drip into the pot. I surveyed her face. She looked really upset, and no wonder. Maybe running off and leaving her alone right now wasn't such a great idea. But I did have an appointment with my real estate agent, Chase McDermott. I don't mind at all. But I'm on my way to look at a potential space for my store. You want to come? Hannah will be there, too. She nodded. That would be great. I'm not sure I want to be alone, especially since you always have double chip cookie dough ice cream in your freezer. I raised a shoulder. It's my go-to cure-all. It's really good to see you, Jennifer, she said, her smile genuine. You, too, I said, smiling back. Then we poured coffee into 2 tumblers and headed out the door. Missy and I arrived downtown a little while later and spotted Hannah waiting as I pulled into a parking space outside the store I was interested in renting. Missy? Hannah squealed and came running over to us. Hey! What are you doing here? Missy stepped into Hannah's hug and squeezed. It's a long story. The wedding's off, that's the short version. We'll talk about it over wine sometime. I heard, sorry about that, Hannah said, scrunching up her face before peering into the storefront's window. Are you sure this is the one, Jennifer? I stepped back, surveyed the white awning and then the address above the door. Yes. Hannah cupped her hands and looked in the window. It's not bad. I crammed my cheek next to hers. My stomach sank as I took in the space. The location was fantastic to attract walk-in shoppers from surrounding stores, but the inside was narrow and very dirty. The previous tenant had been an artist, a messy one from the looks of things. Oh, no. It's a total mess. You knew that from what the real estate agent told you, Hannah reminded me. The space is also a steal for the location, which is a fantastic perk for a business launch. Hannah had a point. I glanced around at the stores, restaurants, and art galleries that occupied this area downtown. The location is ideal. This front window is fabulous, Missy said, gesturing with her manicured finger. No matter what they're shopping for, they will stop to look through this window. Do you really think so? I asked, feeling a bit of letdown at seeing the mess in person that my real estate agent had warned me to expect. It's all about the window display. One look at your bags, and everyone will realize you're a genius, that your bags are incredible, and then they'll buy 1, or 2, or a set. Hannah looked up and down the street. Where is your real estate agent? I fumbled through my purse to find my cell. I'm not sure. My phone beeped just as I pulled it out. It was my real estate agent, Chase McDermott, running late from my earlier appointment. We'll be there soon. He had said he got permission from the owner to give me the code to the lockbox, so I punched in the numbers he'd given me and we stepped inside. I took a deep breath. I'm loving that it's an end unit. The windows and lighting are great. You're going to sell the luggage? Then how about going a less traveled route with merchandising? After all, they are travel bags. Missy tapped a finger against her pouty lips and then she smiled, the first real smile I'd seen on her face all morning. Instead of putting a few on a plain white shelf or something equally boring, why not go bold? Bright colors for the backdrop? Or some scenery? A forest or a road? Can you imagine it? I love that idea. I tilted my head, thinking hard. I could do the Eiffel Tower, a skyline. A river, with a raft on it. Hannah ducked as she said the words. Very funny, I said, my mind immediately picturing those deep blue eyes and the feel of Dylan's hand around mine. He'd said he'd call me, which gave my belly a warm feeling just thinking about talking to him again. Wait. Missy held up a finger. What do you mean, you've had enough rafting? When have you ever gone rafting, Jennifer? Hannah set up a double date for us and I thought we were meeting at a restaurant called Whitewater Sushi. Missy nodded. That sounds more your style. As we walked around the space, the details of my double date disaster spilled out of me. Missy waved at a cobweb that hung above her head. I can't believe you were stranded on an island alone with this guy for hours. Was there any smooching? I rolled my eyes. No, he was a perfect gentleman. It's fine to kiss on a first date, Hannah said. Not when you're stranded on an island, I said, thinking about how worried I'd been when we'd had to pull ashore. and how differently I'd felt when we left, thanks to Dylan. Especially when you're stranded on an island. Hannah ran her fingers across a surface and surveyed the smudge of dirt there. It probably would have taken your mind off that fact. Oh, he took my mind off being stranded. I paused, not really wanting to share our private conversation right now. We'd talked about so much: work, family, dreams, bucket lists. We actually covered a lot of territory for a first date gone wrong. Everyone's had a bad blind date, Missy said, by way of consolation. It wasn't that bad, I said, feeling my cheeks heat. No? Hannah asked. I squirmed a little, pretended to be absorbed with the dust on the tips of my shoes. We admittedly don't seem to have a lot in common. But he was surprisingly easy to talk to. He's a really nice guy. Define really nice guy. He looks like an outdoor adventures model, Hannah said. How was your date? I asked. Not awful, she said, shrugging. We're going out again. 3 weeks so far, which may be a record for me. You did seem pretty into each other. I looked around the space again. I could put a small counter near the back, maybe with a coffee bar. Hello? Earth to Jennifer. Hannah waved a hand in front of my face. I asked for more details. About Dylan? I asked, snapping out of my reverie. He's nice, funny, and he seemed to get me. Wow. What's that like? Missy asked. Kyle didn't get me at all. Kyle is a toad, Hannah announced, before turning to grin at me. I'm glad to hear that the two of you got along. But where can it go really? I asked, getting to the point I hadn't wanted to think about. Dylan and I are complete opposites. He's the outdoorsy, swim with sharks, sleep in a tent type of guy. My idea of roughing it is a hotel without a restaurant attached. Hannah shrugged. Opposites attract. Do they work out, though? I asked, twiddling my fingers against my phone. That's the question. Missy raised both palms. Don't ask me. I have no clue about relationships. Clearly. Where's the real estate agent? Hannah asked. You need to sign a lease and get on to the next step. Missy turned to me. You gonna do it? My eyebrows rose. Take the space? She shook her head and tapped a foot against the floor. Give Dylan a do-over date. I bit my lip and thought of the laughter we'd shared. That had been good. Really good. I wanted more of that. I think I will. That's the spirit, Hannah said. The real estate agent chose that moment to call. I answered, feeling ready to say I was going to take the space. Before I could even get the words out, he announced, Hi, Jennifer. Just got off the phone with the owner's real estate agent. There's a lot of interest in the space, and the landlord wants to see all applications before she decides. I sucked in a breath. All right. That's reasonable. I'll drop in and fill out the app. I chewed my bottom lip. How many other prospective tenants can there be? Currently? 20, he said. And I felt like the floor had dropped out from under my feet. Chapter 6. I can't believe this is happening, Missy said, sitting in the front passenger seat of my car, her words echoing my own feelings as my mind still reeled about all of the applicants that wanted the business space that seemed perfect for my store, once I cleaned it up. Missy was upset for an entirely different reason though. The hotel had somehow lost her reservation and there were no other hotels available this week. Some big conference was in town and every room was sold out. As for me, in addition to the problem with my business space, I couldn't believe I'd just, accidentally, texted Dylan what had to be the worst after a bad date text in history. I'd be cool with a do-over date if you're up for it. Eek! I'd be cool? Who talks like that to a guy they like? I'd meant to backspace and come up with something better, but I'd hit send instead. I blamed technology for my current disaster. It's not like my thumbs are that big, so why do they always tap on the wrong keys? I couldn't unsend the text, so frustrating, and I couldn't figure out how to get my application in a better position with the landlord, but at least I could figure out how to help Missy. I turned to her. Forget finding another hotel. Why don't you just stay with me while you're apartment hunting? Missy's face lit up. You wouldn't mind? Not at all. I put the car into drive and headed back toward the apartment. Traffic was light since it was the weekend, so I zipped down the streets with ease. We could split that pint of double chip cookie dough ice cream, too. If you want. Drowning my sorrows in raw cookie dough and vanilla ice cream wasn't how I'd planned to spend the day, but it seemed like we could both use a pick-me-up. My phone beeped just as I came to a halt at a stoplight. I picked up the phone, hit the text message icon, and my heart skipped. Dylan had texted back, "I'm in. You still want sushi?" I felt a smile spread across my face as I typed back, "There's never a time when I don't want sushi." Honk honk. Green light, Missy said, her mouth twitching. Oops. I dropped the phone into my lap and drove. Mr. Adventure? Missy asked. I nodded. We're talking about dinner, I think. I pulled into my parking space, slipped my phone into my pocket, and got out of the car. My neighbor Rebecca and my other neighbor Jordan were out front arguing. Jordan said, "I'm being blinded by bedazzlement." Rebecca frowned. It's called good taste, in case you haven't heard of it. Missy turned to me and whispered, "Did he just say?" Keep it moving, I advised, keeping up a steady pace. My neighbors had been feuding over her plants versus his plants for months now, which was silly considering the community space had so little square footage. And I had to admit that Rebecca's blouse did feature a whole lot of sparkly bling. My cell phone rang as Missy and I stepped into the apartment. My heart beat a little faster when I saw it was Dylan calling. Hello? Hi. It's me. Mr. Adventure. I closed the door and stood there, bemused. Come again? You just texted me. You said, Mr. Adventure. We're talking about dinner, I think. My mouth fell open and my face heated. Those are the exact words Missy and I had exchanged about Dylan's and my texts. Oh, no. The phone's voice texting option must have been activated. Probably when I dropped it into my lap. How mortifying. Oh, really? I was, what? Think fast? That was my forte, in fact. I was a cool, self-possessed woman capable of making great business deals and communicating with people. So why was I standing there with my jaw hanging open but no words coming out of my mouth? Hello? He asked, his tone bemused. Right. I scraped the nails of one hand over my blouse, straightening imaginary wrinkles. You and I were talking about dinner. When the conversation isn't going well, it's good to switch to a new and positive focus. He chuckled. Does tonight work for you? Great, I said, surprised that he'd suggested seeing me again so quickly. Where were the playing hard-to-get games that I was used to from guys? My heels clicked across the hardwood floor as I headed for the fridge to grab some bottles of carbonated mineral water. Have you tried Takeshi? Doesn't ring a bell. They have a great menu, I said, and then suddenly an article popped into my mind that I'd read about Japanese cuisine. Takashi has about everything you can think of except, blowfish. I wouldn't recommend eating blowfish, though. It can kill you. But then again, you're used to kayaking in shark-infested water. The image of facepalm emoji popped into my head. Why was I talking about deadly food and reminding him of a near-death experience? Clearly my brain was telling me we have nothing in common. That, or it was warning me that I might die on our next date. Could be either option. No, I haven't tried Takashi. But I'm willing to give it a go. His low, baritone voice sent a little shiver up my spine. Cool, I said, and the facepalm emoji reappeared in my head with a facepalm friend. Really, Jennifer? Cool? What was it about that word when I was around him? I yanked a lemon from a fruit basket and set it on the counter. How about 7 o'clock? Perfect. I'll pick you up. I'll see you at 7. We hung up and tiny prickles danced across my chest. I had a do-over date with Dylan Douglas. And this time we would be in my territory. I found myself glancing at the time and counting down the hours until I'd see him. As I stared at the phone, it rang again. My investor. I tapped the green button. Hello, Mr. Moore. How are you? Fine, thanks. I never heard from you after we were disconnected yesterday. 3 facepalm emojis this time. I know. I'm sorry about that. I'm in a bit of a hurry, but I wanted to touch base, he said, apparently not interested in the excuse I was still concocting in my head. I've been in touch with a few manufacturers. Each can make the luggage pink, which will attract more women to purchase them, and that makes the bags even more of a win for us. My stomach curdled. I was a woman and I didn't want pink luggage. Black was universal. The color held up better with travel by not showing the wear as much. Plus, I didn't want Mr. Moore taking over all the decisions and leaving me out of them. I appreciate you checking into manufacturing. However, I have a manufacturer in mind. The one you suggested charges more, per piece, he said, his voice firm. It's the bottom line that we have to think of here. The bottom line? The manufacturer I'd chosen had been creating quality products for me already that were durable. It was on the tip of my tongue to say this, but I needed that investment to come through. I needed the dream home and the retirement plan for safety and stability. I needed to agree to everything he was saying because he was the only investor on the horizon, and without him I could kiss my travel suitcase business goodbye. But saying yes to his ideas and plans meant saying goodbye to everything I envisioned for my travel bag line. I didn't know what to say, so I just thanked him for his interest in my business and hung up the phone as a knot formed in my belly. Chapter 7. Dylan picked me up for our sushi date at 7 sharp, which surprised and delighted me. His adventurous personality kind of struck me as someone who wouldn't be on time, but I'd obviously miscalculated that one. Plus, he looked quite different than he did for our outdoor adventure date. The same dark blue eyes greeted me, but this time his muscular arms and shoulders were covered by a long-sleeved shirt. He wore jeans that hugged him in all of the right places, his sandy brown hair had been brushed back, and I breathed in the scent of soap when I gave him a hug in greeting. Unlike his casual look, I dressed up and wore a plum-colored silk blouse, a dark skirt and heels. You look beautiful, he whispered in my ear as his arms were around me. Thanks, I said, my belly doing a cartwheel. Missy had made herself scarce to give us privacy, which was sweet when I knew for a fact she was dying to get a peek at him. Shall we go? He asked, and a minute later we were driving down the street in his 4x4 pickup truck, complete with the off-road package. We arrived at Takashi and he gave the hostess his name. It impressed me that he'd called in for a reservation. He put his hand on the small of my back as we walked, an old-fashioned gesture that made those butterflies flutter in my belly. Takeshi's interior decor had white tiles with modern chairs in various colors, teal, yellow, green, with high-topped tables. The windows looked out onto a busy street and sidewalk, which meant the people walking by could look in. Not overly romantic, but the food was delish. Dylan waited for me to sit before taking the seat across from me. Our knees brushed and my pulse spiked. On second thought, maybe anywhere with Dylan could be made romantic. He leaned forward and I found myself staring at those dark blue eyes. "How did you find this place?" he asked. "Hannah and I had lunch here, and now it's my favorite," I said. He'd shared his rafting passion with me and I felt glad to share a place I loved with him. The server approached and we ordered a bottle of sake. Then he set the menus down before us and departed. I smiled over at Dylan, finding myself happy to be with him again. "Hannah told me you once did a foodie guide gig?" He smiled. "That's true. Now that's a job I'd sign up for." "How could I get that gig?" "First, you have to wind up broke in Cambodia. Then you luck into meeting a very persuasive and equally broke guy who has a plan that will make sure you eat and get paid." I blinked. "Come again?" His laughter made my toes curl. "I was sleeping in a hostel." "Do you know what those are?" The server brought our wine and poured the cold liquid into white porcelain cups. "I do know about hostels," I said, and then sipped the rice wine, the cool liquid melting on my tongue. "Delish." His eyes twinkled. I'd run out of money and I was sure it was time to pack up and come home. But then I met this guy, Christopher. He was older, and he'd been adventuring for about a decade. He said I shouldn't pack it in, not when all I needed was a plan. As it turned out, he had this plan. Plenty of tourists are foodies, so why not create a tour that gets them to the local food? I love trying new cuisine. Especially direct from the locals. No American spin on it, you know? It was a fun time. I set the cup down. "Wow. You sort of fly by the seat of your pants, don't you? For some reason I assumed you had a nest egg, or something." He shook his head. "I took off with a backpack, a passport, and not much else." The thought made it hard to breathe. "Weren't you scared?" "Absolutely, but I was more scared that if I didn't go, I'd end up in the same routine that kept my bucket list from actuality. That was my do-over in life. It was my reset. I had to take it." "You sure did." I toyed with my glass. "Don't you ever miss having a home, so you can go to the same place every night?" My home base is the apartment above my sister's garage. But I always find a place to go at night. That's not what I mean. I know what you meant. His blue eyes swept over my face. "I guess a location isn't what makes me feel secure. Why is a permanent house so important to you?" Nobody had ever asked me that before. Nobody had ever seemed to wonder why that was important to me, and I found myself squirming in the chair. How much information should I share with him? I didn't know him that well, but we seemed to have skipped over the small talk from the start to share what matters most to us. I took a deep breath. When my parents divorced, everything went topsy-turvy. "You lost your stability," he said, cutting right to the heart of it all. I nodded. I didn't like the feeling of being in freefall. Then there was my mom's second divorce, which led to another freefall. Have you ever been in a physical freefall? I set my empty glass down and he refilled it. I just said I was in a freefall. Yes, but I mean physically, he said, his mouth twisting to the side as if searching for the right words. Have you ever been on a roller coaster that dropped you off an edge? Have you gone skydiving? I was petrified on a raft. Do you really think I've done any of that? He chuckled. Figured I'd check instead of making assumptions. I smiled back at him. The answer is no. Have you? Yes, a lot of times, he said, sounding giddy. You know what's cool about freefall? I can't imagine, my voice trailed off, but I found the excited look in his eyes making me anxious to hear his answer. He leaned closer. The edge of his fingers met mine, his skin warm and steady. Mine were a little chilled. When you freefall, there's a moment of feeling weightless. Everything drops away. It's just you, suspended, and nothing you thought was important actually matters at that moment. Because you're about to die? I asked, my gaze fixed on his. No, because you're living in that moment. His fingers edged closer. I didn't move mine away. You're not thinking about the past. You're not thinking about the future. The moment has captured your entire attention and you feel it. You feel everything. Like exhilaration, beauty, awe, humility, respect, thankfulness. He paused between each word as if remembering that moment right now. When you get to the bottom of the free fall, you appreciate life more. And that's the coolest thing. You fell, you survived, and you're present in everything that's going on around you. You see life with a new perspective. I gulped. How many people die while skydiving? That's rare if you're with professionals. People die in car accidents every day. I sat back. But you need to drive places to survive. The corner of his mouth lifted. Isn't appreciating each and every moment just as important? I tilted my head. You may have me there. He smiled. The freefalls, whether physical or situational, can be reminders of how much we have, not how much we don't have. I try to be thankful, I said, thinking it had actually been a while since I'd taken the time to give thanks. I remember watching Oprah on TV. She said something about a gratitude journal where she wrote one thing she was thankful for every day. Soon, she wasn't able to limit what she wrote to just one thing. And soon after that, she found she could stop writing what she was thankful for because she noticed it all around her. Exactly, he said, just as the server arrived and took our orders. Dylan refilled our tiny porcelain cups with wine. You want to sell travel bags? I do sell travel bags, I said, finding it sweet that he wanted to learn more about me. What I want to do is leave my day job and make the luggage business my full-time and only business. Tell me about the bags. Right now? I have several styles, designed for the female traveler. His eyebrows lifted. Which kind? There are all kinds of travelers. There's the first-class traveler. The backpacker. The ones who travel for adventure and those who travel for relaxation. They all carry different kinds of bags. Right. You'd never take an expensive bag on a backpacking adventure, he said, lifting his cup and then taking a sip. Likewise, you wouldn't carry a heavy-duty bag you used floating down a jungle river to a 5-star hotel. True, I said. So, who are you making bags for? That's a great question, I said, thinking about his very well-made points. You've given me a lot to think about regarding future designs, but my current bags are for the traveling businesswoman. They are my target demographic for the launch of the store. Our food arrived just then, sitting on a wooden boat and arranged in neat rows of round white rolls with colorful fish and masago on top. You were in finance before you got sick, right? Yes, he said, using his chopsticks to maneuver a few rainbow rolls onto his plate. Do you regret leaving that field? Not at all, he said, picking up a roll and dipping it into the dish of soy sauce and wasabi mix. Will you regret leaving your day job for your business? I might. If it doesn't work out. I scooped up pickled ginger and a dab of wasabi. But you're going to do it anyway. Yes. He leaned toward me. His eyes sparkled. Face it, Jennifer, you're an adventurer. An adventurer? Me? No way, I said, shaking my head. How could he even say that after what had happened at the river? I'm an entrepreneur. That's hardly adventurous. Are you kidding me? You're taking huge risks to get what you want, to do what you're passionate about. That's living an adventure. That's brave. I didn't know what to say to that. The compliment left me speechless. Or maybe it was the wasabi. I'd gotten a bigger bite than I'd planned on taking. I swallowed, which made the heat trail down my throat, while my eyes watered. I took a sip of water. Dylan reached across the table, his thumb brushing the corner of my mouth. Sparks flew through my system from his touch. Wasabi, he said. I grabbed the napkin, dabbed at my lips. Better? It's gone, he said. Thanks. My heart beat too fast. I wanted to lean across the table and kiss him right here in the restaurant. Would that be too adventurous for his taste? His words had made me feel bold and happy, making me look at myself in a different way. This do-over date was racking up to be one of my favorite dates ever, and I was glad the night was young. Suddenly, Dylan pulled his cell phone from his pocket. His eyes widened and his gaze darted around the restaurant. Check. Can I get a check, please? What's going on? I asked. Maybe he was used to a different way of doing things. That had to be it. He'd been traveling a long time and maybe this odd behavior was customary in a country somewhere. Although not in one that I'd ever heard about. We don't have to pay until we're finished, Dylan. He pushed this chair back. I'm sorry. It's an emergency. What kind? I have to go. He raced for the front podium as I sat there, gaping at him, while he paid the bill. Then he returned and set a small stack of bills on the table. For a cab. I'm really sorry about this, Jennifer, he said and then darted to the door. As I sat there stunned, with my hands still on my white porcelain cup, I watched him stop before the door. Suddenly, he reversed and hurried back. His hands cupped my face and he leaned close to me. I'll make this up to you, he said. Okay, I said, assuming something important was going on. I promise, he whispered. And then he kissed me. His lips were warm against mine and they felt so right there. He tasted like ginger and rice wine. My belly flipped. Sparks? No. Fireworks. I lit up like the 4th of July. That kiss was sweet, fiery, and everything in between. Finally, he pulled back. I've been wanting to do that since I saw you walking down that dirt road in those Gucci's, looking out of your element but determined not to show it. I laughed and he brushed his lips over mine a second time, before he bolted. He headed out of the restaurant while I sat there wondering if we were ever going to get a date right and then deciding I was getting to like the disaster dates a whole lot. Chapter 8. On Monday evening, I strode into the Jeffries Hotel, which featured gleaming marble floors, plenty of brass, and a quaint lounge tucked into a corner just past the lobby. I dashed into that bar and spotted Hannah and Missy sitting on a couch by some potted plants. The Jeffries' signature cocktail was pink and delish. After my many lattes from Courtney's coffee cart today, I needed to sit and relax. I ordered one at the bar before joining my friends. "Stat please," I said to the bartender. I'd seen a few seasons of Grey's Anatomy and knew that relayed that the cocktail was urgent. Not that we were in a hospital, nor was I about to perform surgery, or anything. Ick. Too messy. But I think he got the message that I needed the cocktail pronto. "You can sip mine until yours arrives." Hannah pushed over a glass half filled with a red blend as I sat down and took a long drink. She laughed. "Hard day?" "You can say that." I set the glass down, reconsidered her question, and then took another sip. "Thank you so much for having this on hand." Missy turned to Hannah. "Jennifer doesn't sleep." And Mr. Adventure bolted on their second date. Not a good combination. Hannah waved at the black-suited waiter. "Dylan did what?" "He ran out while we were in the middle of our sushi date." I closed my eyes, the memory of that kiss replaying in my mind and making me warm all over. After relaying the details of our date through to his departure, I told them about that kiss. "You didn't tell me he kissed you," Missy said, as if she'd caught me in a criminal act. "I know. I'm sorry." I adjusted the clip that was holding my hair back in a twist. "I was trying to forget about it." Hannah paused long enough to order a fresh round of drinks for the two of them. "Was the kiss that bad?" "No, it was that good," I said, not wanting to admit that aloud. But after thinking about Dylan's kiss over the last 2 days and dreaming about even more kisses, there was no denying it. That kiss had been good. The best kiss I'd ever had, in fact. But he ran off and left me sitting there, by myself. "Not good," Missy said, nodding. "Look, we haven't dubbed him Mr. Adventure for nothing," I said, lifting my martini glass. "The man can't sit still. I'm looking for a stable life, which includes a stable guy. Dylan clearly isn't right for me despite whatever amazing chemistry we have between us." Hannah straightened. "How can you think he's not right for you?" Hello, he ran off during our date," I said, in case she hadn't understood me the first time. "I mean ran, too. You wouldn't believe how fast. I'm shocked he didn't set the floor on fire since his feet were moving at high speed. And I haven't heard from him since that night. That was the real kicker. I get that something urgent had happened and I could get over that. I mean, he'd even been thoughtful enough to leave me money for a cab, which he didn't have to do. But why hadn't he called me? You do know Felicia has been in the hospital, right?" Hannah asked. "Felicia?" My eyebrows shot up as my brain raced to figure out who this Felicia lady could be. "Oh, right. His pregnant sister. She's in the hospital?" Hannah nodded. "Complications with the pregnancy." Missy gasped. "No wonder he ran off." I thought about that as the server set down their drinks. I lifted my Jeffrey's martini and took a sip. The sweet liquid rolled over my tongue and down my throat. Yum. He could have said something to me. "Because guys are so rational when it comes to pregnant women and babies," Missy said, snorting. And, yes, that was sarcasm. No guy is ever rational around those things. "That's true," I said, thinking of every rom-com I'd ever seen that featured a man having to deal with an infant and how the scene always resulted in mayhem. "You should give him another chance," Missy said, all things considered. "That kiss, among them," Hannah added. I did want to go on another date with Dylan. But it stung that he hadn't called to ask me out. That had to mean something. How long would a guy wait to call if he was, say, helping a sister with a new baby? Hannah surveyed the bar menu. "Oh, chili fries." I stuck a finger over the top of the menu she held, pulled it down a few inches so I could see her face again. How long? A day, a week? She hasn't had the baby yet. It was a false alarm. Hannah raised the menu again and she made a few humming sounds. I'm sure he'll call. I'm glad you're sure, I said, since I wasn't. Dylan and I were too different. Nothing about us made sense. Maybe he'd realized that, and the thought made my stomach drop. How's everything going with Patrick? She shrugged. We broke up. I clapped a hand to my forehead. Foot, meet mouth. Hannah set the menu down. It's okay. We're fine. What happened? We're just too different. Huh, I said, thinking Dylan and I were in the same boat. Don't worry so much, Jennifer, Missy said. If it's meant to be, then he will call. That's what Courtney, the coffee cart lady, told me today. Well, not the calling part, but about my life. She's kind of intuitive. Do you know her? She was wearing this neon green shirt with sequins this morning. She says she used to be a lawyer, but I can't picture it. We know Courtney, I said. She left a prospering career to do the thing that made her happiest. Those words took me right back to my bags and the phone call I'd had with the real estate agent just a few minutes before. Bad news today. I didn't get the store space, which is really disappointing. It was a good space. Missy shook her head, her dark hair bouncing over her shoulder. Maybe that will be a blessing in disguise, especially since a store on the opposite corner just opened up. I saw it while I was walking to get my coffee this morning. It's smaller than the other space, but it has a nice layout. And there's a sporting goods store right next door. If you sold your bags right next to that store, you might get some business from their customers. I grabbed my phone and started texting my real estate agent. You're a lifesaver, Missy. I mean it. Hannah ordered the cheese and fruit plate. We munched on it as we chatted away. I kept glancing at my phone. I needed to talk to Mr. Moore again about his pink idea that I so didn't love. I needed to whip up a few new designs, too. My conversation with Dylan made me realize that not every woman wanted to travel the same way, and I needed an option for every type of woman. I needed more than a pink bag to attract shoppers, too. Chapter 9. The next day, I left work around 5 o'clock, went home, and started working on my business. Every time Dylan entered my mind, I pushed thoughts of him aside. I'd last talked to him when he'd left our sushi date Saturday night. Now it was Tuesday night and I still hadn't heard from him. Not even a text. Thanks to Hannah, I understood that his sister had a health scare and my heart went out to him. I rationalized that we'd only had 2 dates and he didn't owe me any kind of explanation as to why he'd shot out of Takashi. Still, even with that rationale, his silence stung. The truth was that I liked him. I'd opened up to him. I'd had fun with him. That kiss, it had done something to me. I hadn't been able to get it out of my mind. I'd never felt the surge of emotions that had come from that kiss. But what was on the other side of a kiss like that? Nothing. I had to get my business off the ground, not spend my time wondering about a guy. I had to get my life in order. I wanted a life filled with the certainty and safety I'd lost so long ago and never really got back. I needed to forget about Dylan and stay focused on my business. With that in mind, I went back to my designs. As if part of some cosmic joke, my phone rang and Dylan Douglas flashed across my cell phone screen in bold letters. My heart leapt. I stared at the phone, wanting to answer but not sure I should. Hadn't I just decided I didn't need any complications in my life? Dylan was anything but safe. He was the least safe guy on the planet. He was the kind of guy who would pick up and go whenever he felt like it. If I dated him, fell for him, I'd end up being left behind. And I'd been left behind before. I don't recommend it to anyone. My heart hurt just thinking about it. It was the worst thing in the world, being left behind by people you care about who don't want to stay anymore. No matter how good our connection had seemed, I had to remember that he was going to leave. His life was all about finding new things, and everything, for him, was a new adventure and temporary. After 6 rings, my phone went silent. My stomach tightened, but I told myself it was for the best, and turned back to my designs. Chirp! Chirp! A text came in and I glanced at my phone. Dylan Douglas said, "Hi, Jennifer. I'm sorry about the other night. My sister had to go to the hospital and I panicked. I panicked then, with the urge to call him and comfort him. How awful to worry about your family. But calling him wouldn't get me toward my goals. So, I put my phone down, looked at the new mock-ups, and smiled. I had the beginnings of 3 new designs. Everyone needed more waterproof bags, no matter how they traveled. I needed to find a better material. My mood soured fast. Mr. Moore was determined to build the bags as cheaply as we could, mark them up, and sell as many as possible. It was a good business plan, sure, but it was my name on those bags. Did I want to be known for affordable bags that weren't high quality and wouldn't hold up well? The thought gave me an icky feeling. No, I didn't. Making them more cheaply would mean a cheaper product, all right. I didn't want that. I wanted what I saw in my head and heart to be out there on the market. I wanted something useful for travels that would be durable and last a reasonable amount of years. Unlike Dylan and me, we wouldn't last as long as Mr. Moore's cheap bag. So, I picked up the phone and responded, "No worries." There. That should do it. No real comment, a simple reassurance that offered no promises. I went back to the bag designs. One was a backpack style. It could be carried like a purse too. Cute and functional. I added a few details to it. My phone beeped again and I resisted checking the text for 3 minutes that felt like 3 hours. Feeling torn, I read the message, "You free for coffee right now?" Nope. Not free. Coffee with Dylan was the last thing I needed, although the coffee part sounded very appealing since 4 hours of sleep last night wasn't exactly making me feel rejuvenated. Tempting, but no. I didn't need that hot, dreamy guy with his habit of picking up and walking out. There was nothing stable about his life. Although he had kissed me goodbye. Maybe that was why I texted back, "I'd love to get coffee with you." Oh, great. I couldn't even blame technology for that text, because I'd typed it of my own free will and sent it knowingly. What happened to my plan? Why, no really, why, did I grab my things and run out the door to meet him? Maybe because the thought of not seeing him ever again was not okay with me, no matter how I rationalized we'd be better off apart. 5 minutes later, I arrived at Bernie's Bakery in East Sacramento. The quaint shop was crowded, but I spotted Dylan right away. He wore shorts that showed his tanned legs and a well-fitted short-sleeved shirt. He waved at me and stood as I made my way to the table. "I didn't know what to order for you." "I'll grab it now." "Thanks," I said, while settling into the chair. "I'd love a large latte." He went to the counter and ordered from the honey blonde barista, who had a pretty streak of purple in her hair. He came back a few minutes later with 2 cups and sat down. "I owe you a huge apology for the way I abruptly left Saturday night. Hannah told me about your sister." "It's fine. What else could you do? He winced. Tell you what was going on? I panicked when the alarm went off. He patted his phone. It vibrates 3 times as a signal from Felicia. The latte was perfect, creamy and delicious but not too sweet. Your brother-in-law's out of town for work, right? I asked. He nodded. Yeah. I've been a little overprotective. Must be guilt. Guilt? I asked, taking another sip. I haven't been around that much. I should be here more. In the back of my mind, I think that's why I've been interested in buying this whitewater rafting business. I remembered him telling me about his interest in that business. I thought what appealed to you was trading trips with other adventure companies, I said, thinking this was a new development. He might be sticking around? Yes, I do want to keep traveling, he said, leaning forward in the chair, a line forming between his eyebrows. But I've been thinking about when you asked me if I ever wanted to settle down. I do want a home base, a real one. Which is nowhere near the same thing as being stable, but I didn't think there would be any point in my saying that fact. I see. So, anyway, he set his cup down and looked me in the eye. In addition to helping Felicia, I've been doing some heavy thinking these past few days. Still, I should have called you. We seemed to agree on that point. I didn't want to dwell on it any longer, so I decided to change the subject. Guess what I did today? The line between his eyebrows faded and he seemed to let out a breath. What did you do? Started the design for 3 new bags. Thanks to you. Me? Yes, I said, a shy smile rising on my lips. You asked me great questions about my target demographics. Some that I hadn't considered before. Thank you for that. You're welcome. He cleared his throat, holding his mug with one hand. I also didn't mean to ambush you like I did when I left. I held my breath as disappointment surfaced. Was he saying he hadn't meant to kiss me? Did he regret my favorite kiss ever? I shouldn't have surprised you like that, he said. Oh, was that it? You didn't hear me complaining. He paused. I wanted to kiss you so badly I didn't think that through. That's okay. It was a great kiss, I said, giving him a reassuring smile as my heart sang. Talk about laying all your cards on the table. Even if you did run away right after it happened. Like some kind of kissing bandit. We stared at each other a moment. Then his lips parted and he grinned. I grinned back. Then he laughed and I did, too. That laughter was just like the laughter at the river, which took hold of us until the chuckles escaped unwittingly. I laughed so hard my belly hurt and other customers turned to look at us. He shook his head. I'd planned to walk you to your door and ask to kiss you goodnight like a proper gentleman. Well, at least you got the second part right, I said, winking at him. You're generous to give me another chance, he said, his tone sobering. I can't believe you agreed to meet me tonight. We don't have the best track record. No, I guess not, I agreed, sitting back in the chair. Every time we got near each other something strange happened. Dylan and I seemed so wrong for each other. I knew exactly what happened when 2 people who were opposites tried to make it work. Breakup, divorce, and then everyone's life ruined. I'd seen that happen multiple times. My brain kept telling me that, but it didn't seem to be computing in my heart. We chatted for nearly 2 hours, before I started yawning and Dylan offered to drive me home. After talking so much in the cafe, we were strangely quiet on the drive back. It was a comfortable silence, though. One that didn't feel like anything needed to be said. Then he walked me to the door. I took out my key and turned to smile at him. I looked into his blue eyes and hoped I knew what he was thinking. The corners of his mouth curved upward. "May I kiss you goodnight?" "You most certainly may," I said, with a feathery feeling in my belly. He stepped closer, brushing my cheek with the back of his knuckles. "I'm glad Hannah introduced us." "Me, too," I said, lifting my lashes. "You know what else?" he asked. "What?" I asked, winding my arms around his neck. "For the first time in my life, there's nowhere else I'd rather be," he said. Then he pressed his mouth to mine and I was lost. My heart melted in that kiss and I knew he had a piece of me I'd never given away before. As the kiss deepened, I couldn't help realizing how strange it was that this adventurer was the first man I'd really connected with. He seemed to get me and I was starting to understand him. As we kissed, I knew we didn't have all of the answers as to where this was going. The only thing I did know is that I didn't want us to stop. Chapter 10. All right. It's official. There's something about Dylan that makes me forget why I need my defenses up and in place all of the time. And he's a good reason to not just put them up, but to add some extra reinforcement to them while I'm at it. When he said goodbye last night, he promised to call me the next day and I believed him. As I got ready in the morning, my mind kept wandering to thoughts of Dylan, replaying our time together, even though I had a huge day coming up. I needed to talk to my potential investor, do my actual day job, and keep training Hannah to take over for me when I left it. On top of all of that, I had a huge pile of laundry that needed to be sorted into machine versus dry cleaning piles. I also needed to get those new designs mocked up the rest of the way and try to find some suitable textiles for them. I was at work the next day, placing yet another hot pink sticky note onto my whiteboard when my cell phone rang. I looked down to see Mr. Moore's name on the screen. I picked up fast, thankful I wasn't on a raft on the river this time. "Hello, Mr. Moore. Did you get the new design mock-ups I emailed to you?" "I did, and I have to tell you that I don't think we need another bag design. The way to get into the market is to offer one very good product first, sell a lot of them, and then build from there as demand arrives." I took a long breath. Once upon a time, I would have agreed, especially since I knew how much each new design would increase the manufacturing cost. But Dylan had shown me a new angle to my target demographic that I hadn't considered. I wanted quality over quantity, not just a quick buck. "Mr. Moore, I think we should be trying to hit the varying needs of different female travelers. The original idea was to create luggage that suits a woman's every need and makes it easier for her to travel without requiring multiple bags. An all-in-one bag, if you will. Of course, I love that plan. Buyers are going to love the original bag, which will be especially more attractive to women now that it comes in pink." I cringed. "But, sir, it will also make our brand easy to spot at an airport, which makes our products stand out on the conveyor belts at baggage claim." "I love this bag and your idea. That's why I'm calling to solidify our proposed contract. I need to know if you're on board with me giving the go-ahead to the manufacturer." No, I wasn't. I needed to say so, and right then. Because if I didn't, he'd go ahead and nothing would be mine anymore, and every bag would be pink. Ping! The reminder text told me I had about 30 seconds to make it up several floors and down a long hallway to the conference room. "Is there any way I can give you a quick call back on that this evening?" "I'm going into a meeting now," I said, the heels of my pumps clattering along the floor as I strode out of my office and toward the elevator. The doors were open, which saved me time. I broke into a run. Mr. Moore said, "I'd prefer an answer now." I hurried into the elevator just as the doors began to close. "Yes, hello?" "Oh, No. No, no, and no. I'd gotten out part of what I wanted to say, which was, yes, I know you'd prefer an answer right now, but the elevator had cut off my reception after that first yes. What if he thought I was giving him the go-ahead? Visions of pink bags danced through my head one after another and never ending. I scrambled out of the elevator and hurried down the hallway, hitting the call back button with my index finger repeatedly. No answer. The door to the conference room swung open. My boss said, "Oh, there you are, Jennifer. Just in time. Please come in." I needed to send a text to Mr. Moore in a bad way. I had to let him know I hadn't meant yes. This was a nightmare. He was going to turn my beautiful bags the color of an antacid drink. Ugh. I took my seat at the conference table and tapped onto my text icon. My boss had other ideas. He said, "Jennifer, I believe you know." He went around the table introducing everyone, and it would hardly be polite to text through a series of introductions, so I set the phone down, smiled, and greeted everyone. Desperation set in. I had to give a presentation right now, but I also had to at least send a text to Mr. Moore clarifying my position. Should I say I'd forgotten to bring in the materials and I'd be right back? Wouldn't work, because the neat folders were sitting right on the table before us. Fake an illness? Scream? I had to call home because my apartment was on fire? What? Hannah sat across the table from me, giving me a weird look. "What's wrong?" she mouthed. But everyone was looking at me, so I couldn't answer her. My stomach dropped about 3 feet. I had no choice but to get the presentation over with, so I stood and started. I swept through the details as fast as possible without sounding unprofessional. It was like trying to speed date my way through a serious business deal. My heart kept lurching as I talked. My eyes kept darting to my phone. It was right there, begging me to just send that text already. Finally, I finished. In a breathless tone, I asked, "Any questions?" So many questions. I was never going to get to text Mr. Moore in time to stop. My dream that I'd worked on every day for the past 2 years, including holidays, had turned into the pink bag debacle. After the meeting broke up, Hannah came over and whispered in my ear that I needed to lay off the coffee. She didn't know that too much caffeine was the least of my problems right now. I slumped into the chair and tried to call Mr. Moore again. No answer. I groaned and fired off a text explaining that I hadn't agreed to the manufacturing and that I'd been cut off by the elevator mid-sentence, for which I apologized profusely. I also emphasized not to proceed with his manufacturer. Hopefully he hadn't already started the process. I had 3 more meetings to get through, and it didn't take my boss long to let me know he thought I should slow down a bit. I managed to smile, thank him for the suggestion, and then went back to my office. I plopped down at my desk, staring at my sticky notes and then at the open calendar on my phone. These 16-plus-hour workdays and meetings had once been my dream. This dream was over. Now the bags were my dream, and I may very well have just ruined that for myself by stepping into that elevator. I couldn't do both jobs, that much was obvious. But I couldn't leave this job without knowing I had some security from the bag business. Between meetings, I called a delivery service and had some fettuccine Alfredo delivered. I managed to eat it while firing off emails and scanning replies. Next, I dashed into another meeting, out of it, and then tried to call Mr. Moore again. No answer. No reply to my text either. I couldn't focus on my tasks. I kept stressing about that call and hoping the text got to him in time. When I grabbed my things at 5 o'clock and called it a day, I'd still received no answer from him. As I pulled out of the parking garage, my phone beeped. I grabbed it, keeping my eyes on the car in the lane ahead of mine. Hello? Hi, it's Dylan. Do you have plans for dinner? I'd gobbled down the fettuccine alfredo around noon and was hungry again. But I had too much to do to go out on a date. I still hadn't heard back from Mr. Moore. I needed to get to that laundry. I had to prep for a meeting the next morning. No, I don't have plans. I screamed, internally, as soon as those words left my mouth. My heart was still refusing to listen to my head apparently. Good, he said, his voice warm. Can you meet me? I'm already here. No, I couldn't. Or, I shouldn't. But I said, sounds good. I'm driving anyway. I'll text you the address. Can't wait to see you. Me, too, I said, even as I wondered what I was doing going on a date when I had so much on my plate. But driving to meet Dylan felt like a breath of fresh air that I desperately needed. I stopped at a red light, plugged the address into my GPS, and then turned left. 20 minutes later, I pulled into a parking lot and saw Dylan standing at the entrance of a dilapidated building. He looked amazing in jeans and a faded shirt as he sauntered over to my car. I cracked the window. If you're in danger, just jump on the hood and hold onto the windshield wipers. I'll drive us out of here. His laughter was rich and warm. Thanks for the offer, but I'm good. You sure? This area seems sketchy. Trust me, he said, getting into the passenger side. Just drive up to the speaker and we'll order there. The food is amazing. I had my doubts as I stared at the rundown building with a drive-through attached. When I rolled around the side, I saw a speaker box but no menu. I gave Dylan a look. You like burgers? He asked, watching me nod. These are the best burgers I've ever had. Order a single with house sauce and pickles. You won't regret it. I hope not, I said, and then ordered 2 singles with house sauce and pickles, 2 fries, and 2 drinks. Then I pulled up to the window, waving away the cash Dylan held toward me as I handed the checkout person a 20 from my wallet. Thanks, Jen, Dylan said, rubbing his hands together in real glee as I passed him the cardboard box the food had come in. My belly did a flip at the nickname. Nobody has called me that since I was 5 years old, I said, giving him a look. Do you like it? From you? I asked, looking into those deep blue eyes. All of a sudden I forgot about not liking being called Little Jen in my youth. When Dylan had said it, my heart melted. As a matter of fact, I do. Good, he said, and then directed me to a corner of the lot and I parked. A small picnic table sat on a small hump of grass and we got out of the car and went to the bench. Dylan arranged the food and napkins, and then dug in. You're not eating, he said, and then popped a fry in his mouth. You're observant, I said. The burger looked good, but I still had doubts. I'm waiting to see if you die from food poisoning first. That will never happen, he said, licking the corners of his mouth for good measure. I have a cast-iron stomach. I once ate raw sausage. My mouth hung open. Why? Someone dared me to, and I was hungry. That's disgusting. Sashimi is raw. That's different. Fish and pigs are totally different. He smiled at me. Same principle, though. Will you do anything someone dares you to do? I stared at him, flummoxed. He'd try anything, and I couldn't even trust that a burger from a place called Burgers Here would be good. I watched him laugh and shrug in answer, so I picked up the burger and took a tiny bite. He shrugged. Well? The sauce flavors filled my tongue and I swallowed. It's good, I said, and I wasn't even lying. This was by far the best burger I'd ever had. I took another bite. How'd you find this place? My folks used to come here when I was a kid. When I was sick, they'd stop by to pick up a burger for me and then sneak it into the hospital. I tried the wedge-shaped fries. Also delicious. Steaming and tender on the inside, crisp and a little salty on the outside. I can't imagine you being that sick. Dylan sipped his soda and then swirled a fry through a blot of ketchup. I can't either. Sometimes it feels like it happened to someone else. Or in another lifetime. I dabbed my mouth with a napkin. Really? He nodded. All bad things fade, you know, if you let them. I looked down at my half-eaten burger. I'd never let the aftermath of my folks' divorce fade. Because the pain still felt real. Like a storm that comes through and knocks the wind out of you. Every time I thought I was over it, I felt a jolt of pain that reminded me how terrible it was to be upended, to have all of my safety and security snatched away. His hands found mine. I looked up. He smiled at me. You okay? Yes, I said. In truth, I hadn't been okay for a very long time. I'd been working 2 jobs and barely doing anything else until that crazy double date on the river. When I'm with you, everything feels right again. I know that sounds lame. I feel the same way, Jen, he said, his tone low and thick. He cupped my cheek with his hand and leaned forward until his mouth met mine. His lips were warm and tasted salty like fries. I relaxed against him and let his kisses tease my senses until sparks flew throughout my body. For a few minutes, I forgot we were sitting at a bench in view of whoever might be driving by. I didn't think at all. Not about how wrong we were for each other, not about my issues with Mr. Moore. All I did was kiss him and feel like my world had finally clicked into place. Finally, he pulled away and rested his forehead against mine. I could feel his warm breath against my lips. I've never brought anyone here before, he said. Really? I asked, pulling back a little. It wasn't the most romantic place to go on a date, but romantic didn't seem to be our style. I was touched he'd take me to a place that meant something special to him. You're the first, he said, his voice low. Were you afraid anyone else would drive off without taking on the burger challenge? I asked, the corners of my mouth hitching up. He chuckled. You're more adventurous than you think. I don't know about that, I said, ducking my head. I'm falling for you, Jen, he whispered. I lifted my head and those dark blue eyes peered at me, making my insides go all gooey. Good, I said, my heart leaping in my chest. Because I'm falling for you, too. He tilted my chin up and then we were kissing all over again. Chapter 11. After our dinner at Burgers Here, Dylan asked me to drive to the next part of the date he'd planned. As soon as I saw what he had in mind, though, I came to a screeching halt. In the center of an empty field sat a hot air balloon tied to massive stakes. The balloon was striped and colorful and seemed so out of place that I couldn't stop staring at it. The buildings in the distance looked small behind the large balloon, and white clouds floated in the late afternoon sky. We got out of the car and I pointed. That's a balloon. Yes, it's a hot air balloon, Dylan clarified. Still, it's a balloon. You know that balloons pop, right? I mean, practically anything can pop them. And there are so many trees. Those limbs would go right through that thing. Don't worry, he said, holding his hand out to me. I've done this before. This guy here is a friend of a friend and I trust him. He gestured toward the man standing beside the balloon's large basket. He's licensed and highly experienced. We'll be perfectly safe. I studied the guy. He didn't look like a pilot. He looked way too relaxed to be taking my life into his hands. No, this isn't safe. It's a death trap. And there's fire. The fire makes the hot air so the balloon can rise. I'm sure it does. I stood still beside the car with my heels sinking into soft ground. I don't think this is a good idea. How about this? We get in the basket, but we won't untether the balloon unless you're comfortable. We'll just hang out right there. Can you blow the fire out? If I do that, the balloon will collapse on top of us. Oh. I shifted a little, my heels sinking deeper into the soft grass parking lot. What if? I took a deep breath, unable to finish my sentence. Dylan had clearly gone to a lot of trouble to surprise me with this date. So, I reached out and took his hand. His warm, strong fingers laced through mine as we walked toward the balloon. I climbed up a step and he swung the small door shut once we were inside the basket. The breeze made the balloon drift a little. I swallowed a panicked cry. He gave me a side glance. I'd hoped you'd want to take a ride. I'd hoped for an after-dinner drink, I said, but wasn't really joking. Was there really any reason for us both to be disappointed? Well, yes, there was if I was about to allow the possibility of plummeting to my death. My stomach clenched. There was no way that I, Jennifer Page, would ever take off in a balloon. It's okay if you don't want to go up. The view isn't bad, even from here. I looked around the field that was edged with trees. I spotted the parking lot behind us, thinking the view wasn't great at all from here. But he was trying to make the best of my obvious terror, so I gathered my courage. Maybe we could go a little higher to improve the view. Dylan gestured to the man, who climbed in and stood behind us. The man did something to the fire and a rope. We drifted upward. I grabbed the side of the basket and held on for dear life. Dylan held his hand up and the man halted us just a few feet up. How's this? Dylan asked. Irritation flared within me as I remembered the spectacle I'd made by being afraid of the river. In the end, I was fine and I'd panicked for nothing. This time? We were in a hot air balloon, with a professional, and barely 3 feet off the ground. My fears were ridiculous, and I knew it. Dylan would never have arranged a hot air balloon ride if he didn't know that we'd be safe, so I said, we can go a little higher. You sure? No, yes. The man jiggled the rope and the balloon went a little higher. The view was better already. This wasn't so bad. Just as my nerves had started to relax, my cell phone beeped. I opened my purse and pulled the phone out. Mr. Moore's number flashed on the screen. I hit accept, but then the bars winked out. I'd lost reception. My stomach dropped, and not because of the balloon this time. I'd become distracted with Dylan, but suddenly I remembered my last conversation with Mr. Moore and I panicked. I'm sorry, but we have to get down so I can get a cell phone signal, I said, turning to him with desperate eyes. His expression fell, but I shook my head. Now, please. I have to take this call. It's really important. The man stopped fiddling with the ropes. Are you okay? No, I said, tears prickling my eyes. What's going on? Dylan asked, slipping an arm around me. My shoulders slumped. I made a mistake with my investor today and I have to correct it, I said, and then explained what happened with the elevator. Don't worry, we'll take care of this. Dylan signaled the man piloting the balloon, who sent the balloon back toward the earth. Unfortunately, the bars stayed dark on my phone. Dylan pulled his cell phone out. Maybe mine is working. His phone didn't have any bars either. Part of me loved being swept away on this date with Dylan. Part of me wanted to let him send us into flight. But a bigger part of me knew I couldn't blow this one chance I had with the investor. I stared at my phone, knowing Mr. Moore had the power to affect my entire future. After all of my hard work, I'd finally found myself a way out of the day job I didn't want and into the luggage business I wanted so desperately, the life that promised me stability and safety. I shook my head. There still isn't a signal. We have to get down. I need to talk to Mr. Moore and correct the situation. The guy piloting the balloon said, maybe the buildings are too close. Then the balloon shot upward, instead of down. I gawked at him, before realizing a breeze had moved the balloon a bit, sending it into a graceful circle. My stomach dropped. I had to get down. Now. I had to take that call. I had to set the deal straight. The balloon ride was a distraction. I needed to secure my future, once and for all. I'm sorry, Dylan, I whispered. His gaze met mine. The hurt look in his eyes made me want to say that I would talk to Mr. Moore some other time, and that this adventure date was all I wanted. Instead, I stayed quiet as the man lowered the balloon. As soon as we were close enough to the ground, I flipped open the door and charged out of the basket, staring at my phone. Still no bars. I hightailed it toward the parking lot, holding the phone up, chasing that ever-elusive signal. The heel on my right shoe gave an ominous wobble, which I noted but still kept going. I needed bars on my cell phone and felt the desperation welling up inside me. Come on, I muttered. Just one measly signal, yes. I got the cell working and dialed Mr. Moore. Dread rolled through me as he answered. Hello, Ms. Page. Please tell me that you got my last text in time, I said, noticing my strained tone. Dylan came up beside me and I glanced over at him, but a smile wouldn't come. My whole body was tight and shaky. My future was falling apart, I'd ruined our date, and my stomach was in knots. I did get your text, Mr. Moore said, his voice firm. But I still need an answer from you. My eyes closed. I swallowed hard. Tried to find that cool professionalism that I had worked so hard to build. Only I could smell Dylan's cologne and feel his presence. For a moment, the life of adventure tugged at me. The thrill of it all and that powerful feeling I'd had when I'd conquered my fears at the river. I felt torn between which life I wanted. Then I remembered each divorce, each move, each upheaval that had rocked my world. My eyelids popped open. The gaily striped balloon hung above the ground, against the backdrop of buildings and trees across the parking lot, as if taunting me that I was making the wrong choice. Yes, Mr. Moore. I spoke through lips so dry they stuck to my teeth. I do want to go to the manufacturing phase, but I'm not sold on the color choice. I see, he said. I bit my bottom lip. Is there any way we can discuss that? There must be other options. Pink is a pretty, specific color if we want to create a wide appeal. I'm just not sure about it for the travel bags. Mr. Moore was silent a moment, telling me he'd said pink and he wanted pink. I feared this was the end of the line for my dream. Finally, he said, why don't we have an in-person meeting? Can you fly to New York tonight and meet me at my office in the morning? Was he serious? I'd have to catch the last red-eye, and it would leave in what, just a few hours? How fast could I get home, get packed, and get to the airport? I mentally calculated and there was enough time if I hurried. Yes, I can do that. Had I lost my mind? Was I flying across the country for a man who wanted pink bags? What if he wouldn't change his mind? Was I willing to give up my dream over a color choice? Good. I'll see you in the morning, Ms. Page, he said, and then he hung up. I stood there, my heart pounding way too hard. I had to get to the airport. Mr. Moore's cold tone left no doubt in my mind that if I said no to the color he wanted for my bags, then he was out. He clearly thought he could convince me if we met in person. I couldn't lose the only investor I had, or I'd lose all of my dreams at the same time. Dylan finished talking to the hot air balloon pilot, a fascinating career choice, unless the guy just did this on the side, and then walked back to me. My heart ached. I'd almost missed this call because I'd been distracted with Dylan. I'd been focused before I met him, checking off my to-do list and going in the right direction for my goals. And what was I doing? Trying to talk myself into going up in a hot air balloon? Why? How would that get me toward my goals? It wouldn't. In my head, I knew Dylan and I weren't right for each other. And even if we could mesh our differences, I didn't have time for a relationship. I had to figure out how to compromise my dream in order to keep it. How to get Hannah trained to take over for me at work. I had to nail down a business space and open the store. I had to do so many things, and there wasn't room for adventurous date distractions. I had to tell this to Dylan. I stepped toward him. And the heel that had wobbled earlier wobbled again and then snapped off. Suddenly, I pitched forward, my arms flailing as I tried to regain my balance. Dylan caught me in his arms. I landed against his strong chest, feeling the solid beat of his heart against my chest. My heart ached to be with him. Everything I had to tell him about my goals and what I needed died behind my lips. He held me close, his arms keeping me safe. The scent of his cologne met my nose again. Then he lifted my chin, his lips met mine, and every thought slid right out of my head. Then he pulled back and picked me up, cradling me in his arms. I glanced up at him. "What are you doing?" He grinned down at me. "Saving your other shoe. I know how you feel about your shoes. Are these Gucci, too?" "Wait, my heel." "I know. It broke." "No, I mean, we need to get it," I said, laughing at how comical this must seem. "These shoes are expensive. I can get it repaired if I have the heel." He turned and went back to where my heel lay on the ground. His powerful legs flexed as he squatted, still keeping me in his arms. I reached out and scooped up the heel with one hand. Dylan burst into laughter. His chest rumbled as he laughed and carried me to my car. "If you're worried about the balloon thing, don't be," he said, chuckling. "It's broken heels that really scare you." I couldn't help but laugh. Dylan had a way of bringing me joy. He always seemed to blow past my defenses and get me to do things I wouldn't normally do. I don't mean just sitting at a picnic table eating drive-through burgers either. I mean, he made me want things I knew I couldn't have with him. Things like a real and stable relationship. Love. I have to go to the airport. Right now. I have to meet Mr. Moore in New York in the morning. And I can't see you anymore. His brow furrowed and he set me down beside my car. "You mean you have to end tonight's date, right?" Pain sliced my heart. "No, I mean I can't do this, you and me. I don't need hot air balloon rides and..." "I'm sorry about the balloon," he said, his voice straining a bit. "You seem to have so much fun rafting once you'd let go of your fears. I thought you'd enjoy the view from a hot air balloon ride. But I shouldn't have surprised you like this. I should have asked first." I swallowed the salty lump in my throat. It's not just the balloon ride. What happens when you wake up one day and decide to go swim that fissure? "You actually dive there, and I heard there aren't any sharks," he said, obviously trying for humor. But his facial expression tightened and he couldn't quite look at me. Don't you see how wrong we are for each other? I asked, thinking of all the adventures that would make him happy and scare the living daylights out of me. You need someone who'd love those adventures, too. Someone who can get more than 3 feet off the ground in a hot air balloons. He turned to me, gesturing with one hand. Opposites attract all of the time, Jen. I know they attract, I said, thinking that wasn't our problem. My whole body hurt, but I had to get this all out. But what happens in the end? They crash and burn, that's what. Don't say that, he reached for me, but I stepped back. His hand hung in the air for a moment then dropped. You have to let go sometime, Jen. I know. That's what I'm doing. I'm letting go. Goodbye, Dylan, I said, and then got in my car and cried all of the way home. Chapter 12. Who do you think you are? I asked, looking over at Hannah with terror as she sped up the I-5. Batman, or something? She gunned the engine, signaled, and then crossed 2 lanes of traffic. No time to dilly-dally. You have a plane to catch. We have to get to the airport alive for me to catch that plane ride, I reminded her. To say my driving style was a tad more sedate would be putting it mildly. After all, insurance was expensive and safety was my top priority. She was right that there wasn't time to dilly-dally right now, though. It's not going to be my fault if you miss that plane, she said, and then zoomed past a slow-moving sedan, before exiting the freeway and speeding down the long road to the airport. I clutched the dash. Tell me again why I agreed to let you drive me. Because airport parking is expensive and you're in no position to afford it since you're blowing a big chunk of your savings on a last-minute trip to New York. I flexed my fingers. Oh, right. All of that. Jennifer, are you sure you want to do this? She asked. I have to, I said, firmly. Mr. Moore wanted a conversation in person and Mr. Moore was in New York, so I had to get there. I didn't know what he wanted to talk to me about in the morning, exactly. I knew he wasn't ready to let go of being my investor, but was he willing to let go of the reins and let me run my company my way? Or was I willing to let him be in charge? She put the car into park and I hopped out, ran around to the trunk and grabbed my bag. My black travel bag. I tried to imagine it in the color pink, and then shuddered. Hannah jumped out of the driver's side and walked me to the check-in desk on the sidewalk before the plate glass doors. I got my ticket out and turned to my friend. I can't believe you're doing this, she said. It's not like me, is it? I usually think everything out and map out a plan with a to-do list. No time for that when making spur-of-the-moment decisions. I'm basically winging it right now. I didn't have the time I wanted to get it all in order. The meeting will be fine. You're amazing and you've got this. Thanks, I said, giving her a hug goodbye. She sighed. I just wish. I pulled back. You just wish what? She twisted her hands together. I just wish it had worked out between you and Dylan. He seemed like the perfect guy for you and vice versa. Dylan and I were like oil and water, I said, knowing that was true and wondering why I wished we'd worked out, too. But I had a flight to catch and needed to focus. Well, right now my perfect guy is Mr. Moore. But what about when you come back? You can't tell me you won't miss him. I already missed him, which was why I didn't even want to think about it right now. I blew out a breath and checked the time. Let's just hope that when I come back, I'll have signed with the investor and can get my store launched. I have to go. Wish me luck. You can do it, she cheered. Thanks. I smiled and then headed inside the terminal, moving fast. Security was backed up, as always. Would it be too much to ask them to beef up the staff more? Is that asking so much on behalf of the paying customers? I groaned, checked the time, and calculated how fast I could run in my heels. The security line was moving so slowly and I worried more with each passing second. I had so little time to make that flight. By the time I got through security, I had all of 5 minutes to make it to my gate. I slipped my heels back on and took off at a run. Last boarding call for flight. As the woman called out my flight number, I put my head down and ran faster. I had to make this flight tonight, or everything I'd worked so hard for would disappear. In the back of my mind, I pictured dark blue eyes looking at me and a familiar voice whispering to me that I could do it. I spotted the numbers for my gate up ahead. As I ran toward the gate, the agent turned and moved to shut the door leading to the jetway. "I'm here," I said, holding up my ticket. "Just in time, too," she said, scanning my ticket, ushering me onto the jetway, and then closing the door behind me. The windows of the boardroom gave off stunning views of New York City's concrete and glass skyline. Skyscrapers rose up all around us, seeming to touch the blue skies above them. When I looked down, the cars below looked like toys moving along a dark ribbon, which was, in fact, a wide and busy street. My stomach knotted. What was I doing here? This meeting was way beyond me. I had a small, independent bag business that wasn't even off the ground yet. It seemed too early for this meeting. I hadn't accomplished enough to prove myself to investors who kept offices whose floors were clad in marble antique. Intimidated? Me? Maybe a little. I drew in a breath and told myself to relax. It didn't work. Instead, I studied the table, which was gleaming mahogany. My presentation packet lay on the table, before the expensive ergonomically designed chairs. Chairs that would soon be filled by powerful people who could make my dreams come true, if I could just give in on the color and manufacturer they wanted. My stomach did flips either from my nerves or from the food truck breakfast I hadn't been able to resist. Either way, that was a bad thing. I needed to be cool, calm, and collected. The doors opened and Mr. Moore, a gentleman who looked in his 60s with gray hair and a patrician nose, came into the room, followed by several more men and one woman. I pulled myself together, reminded myself I could do this, and then plastered a smile on my face as I greeted them. I shook hands and mentioned names, all of the things you do when you're determined to make a good impression. They sat down and I went back to my place at the head of the table. My heart pounded in my chest. Sweat wanted to break out on my forehead, but I willed it back and took in a deep breath. "Thank you for inviting me here to speak with all of you this morning." They all smiled at me. That didn't make me feel any more relaxed, though. Their smiles were polite, but gave away nothing else. I grabbed the little remote and brought up my presentation on the screen. "As you all know, no good travel experience is complete without a good bag," I said, gesturing to the bags I'd carefully arranged on a display. The woman asked, "Aren't there already plenty of travel bags on the market?" "There are options available," I said, counting to 3 internally, hoping to settle my stomach. "No such luck. But these designs are different. They are tailored for women. You see, the bags on the market right now don't ask one simple question: how do women travel?" They all leaned forward. "By plane or train or car, I'd assume," Mr. Moore said. "Yes, but..." I clicked the button on my remote and a stock photo of a whitewater rafter appeared on the screen, and it was clear that the person rafting was a woman. Would this woman take a bulky suitcase like this along, while she's traveling to different rafting spots? I asked, clicking again, and then a stock photo of a luxury brand suitcase came up. The woman shook her head. "I'd hope not. She'd ruin it." "Exactly," I said, raising my finger and smiling at her as if she were brilliant. And that wouldn't work out so well, would it? The room chuckled. That's one of the problems, I said, finding my stride. Most bags today ask how women travel, yes, but what they don't ask is where those women are going. They ask how they are going, by plane, train, or car, as Mr. Moore pointed out. But there's no consideration as to where they are ending up. The woman nodded. True. The travel bags I've designed are made to be easy to handle, to be visually appealing, to include proper pockets, dividers, and zippers to suit a woman's every travel need, removing the need to bring multiple bags, which can be difficult to haul. An all-in-one travel bag, whether you're going to a luxury hotel, to a deserted island, or rafting on a river. My heart pinched as I said those last words. I couldn't help but remember how out of place I'd felt dressed in my Gucci heels for whitewater rafting. How Dylan had loaned me his gym clothes. And how by the end, I hadn't wanted to get off the river, I'd had such an adventure. Ms. Page? I blinked, my mind returning to the room. What had I been saying? My line has choices, I said, gesturing to the stock photo on the screen. The woman in that raft wouldn't want to carry a bulky suitcase. She'd need a dry bag-style suitcase, with all of the proper compartments for a change of clothes while camping, bug spray, and, of course, you can't go rafting in the sun without sunscreen. The room chuckled again. I felt encouraged by everyone's engagement, but thinking of sunscreen reminded me of when Dylan had brushed that white cream across my cheeks. And when we're alone on the island, when he held my hand, and when he pulled me out of the cold water. Ms. Page? Mr. Moore asked. Is everything all right? Yes, I said, even though the hole that formed in my heart told me everything most certainly was not all right. The woman in that photo needs a bag like this one. I took my travel bag down and held it out. Easy to stow and store. Waterproof. Strong. And with all of the compartments a woman needs for travel, including a safe spot for her jewelry, any feminine necessities, cell phone, hairdryer, and portable charger. They all looked interested now. I had this. And then I shook my head, knowing I couldn't do this anymore. Listen to me for a moment, please, I said, clasping my hands in front of me and holding them up in the prayer position. I want you to invest in my company. I really do. But I don't want my bags to be sold only in pink. But pink is a popular color for women according to our focus group, Mr. Moore said, his mouth puckering like he'd swallowed a lemon. My eyes flared. This was the first time I'd heard of this focus group, making me wonder if he had really conducted one or if he was just stuck on that color. I didn't want to ask for a copy of the results in case it was the latter. That may very well be, I said, thinking that may very well not be as well. But making a bag pink won't appeal to as many women as a black bag would. Manufacturing the bag in black is practical and keeps the cost low. Pink is a lovely color, but would get dirty more easily with travel. Black is the color I want to launch with, but I'm happy to consider an additional pink bag if we want more options available. But I have to stick to the black for my bags for the launch. My stomach, already queasy, practically boiled. I'd torpedoed the presentation. I knew I had. But I didn't care. I believed I was right, whether Mr. Moore agreed with me or not. I loved this travel bag and all of the bags I'd designed. He could take them or leave them. I see, Mr. Moore said. Thank you for your time, everyone, I said, as my stomach rolled again. I set the little clicker for the slides down, reached for my bags, and started to pack them up. It was over. Done. I'd come a long way for nothing, and that had to be okay. Going with the pink color he wanted would have won me that deal. Would have given me that nice, safe life I needed so badly. No. I didn't need that life. I wanted it. I wanted that seemingly safe life because I thought that if I could have stability then I'd never get hurt again. But that wasn't true. Lots of things hurt me. Like losing Dylan, the man I had real feelings for and a strong connection with, just because I was afraid it wouldn't work out. My heart pinched just thinking about how I'd ruined that chance between us. Turns out getting my car dirty wasn't the hardest part of finding true love, it was sticking with it when fears took over. It also would hurt to build a business that I didn't believe in fully, so at least I'd turned down the stable life for one I believed in. Dylan had taught me that sometimes a little adventure is needed, so we don't miss out on what really matters to us. I felt nervous, but I'd made the right decision. My fingers fidgeted in front of me and I told myself that I'd keep selling my black travel bags on my own, one by one, until... "We want your bags," Mr. Moore said, firmly. The words stopped my hands from moving. I gaped him. "You do? Even if they come in black?" Mr. Moore nodded. "Yes, because your designs are unique and we think the bags will be a success." My wife saw the bag, loved it, and wanted it in pink. She has very good taste. His wife? I knew there hadn't been a focus group. Although that was so not the point. "I'm sure she does," I said, nodding my head in agreement. "My question now is, if we fund the bag in black first, would you be willing to let us do a run in pink as well?" I stifled the triumphant yell that came to my lips. "That's a stellar idea, Mr. Moore." "Yes, I most certainly am willing to do that." "Good," he said, and gave a curt nod. He looked around at the others, who clearly knew he was the authority around here. "Let's get these contracts signed this week after your attorney has a chance to look them over. I'd like to launch before the holiday shopping season." "Any other questions?" I asked. I responded to a handful of questions from those at the table, even though they were really more just clarifications and details. When I left the building an hour later, I wanted to jump in the air and squeal. But, there wasn't room to do that with the multitude of pedestrians moving along the sidewalk. Still, I'd done it. I'd risked everything to keep what I was passionate about. I'd stopped thinking only with my head and let my heart chime in, too. As I walked down the New York City sidewalk, my heart suddenly sank. I'd done that for my business, but not for my relationship. I'd let Dylan go because I hadn't been willing to risk it all to keep what I cared about the most, and the hole in my heart told me that had been a giant mistake. Chapter 13. "I've lost my mind," I said, peering through the open door of the airplane into the endless sky and then to the ground way down below. In 2 days, I'd signed the business deal with Mr. Moore, not what makes me crazy, and I'd signed up to go skydiving, what makes me totally and completely nuts. I mean, after a few hours of instruction in a room and then a few hours of instruction on a trampoline-looking thing, they were going to let me jump out of a perfectly good airplane. Well, with a parachute on my instructor's back. And I'd chosen to do this. Oh, yeah. I'd lost it big time. My fingers wound tightly around the strap of my harness. What was I doing? The instructor yelled, "You have to let go, Jennifer." No, I don't. Thanks, anyway. I scooted backward in my seat, further away from the wind and the sight of the earth below. "I'm fine where I am." The instructor, some dude named Brad, shook his head like he wasn't taking no for an answer. I wondered if he was friend or foe. He cupped his mouth with his hands and hollered, through the wind and racket, "This is your chance to really live." "I know!" I shouted back. "I want to live. That's why I'm not jumping out." He hollered back, "You booked this for a reason, remember?" Oh, right. I had booked this for a reason. Gulp. Did I want to live my life in fear? Did I want to miss out on swimming the fisher, or whatever you're supposed to do there, just because I'm scared? No, I did not. I nodded to Brad, who looked way too nonchalant for a guy who was about to fall 5,000 feet with some stranger who could just whop him in the face while he was falling. Overactive imagination? Me? Yeah, well. Okay, Brad, I said, nodding as I sucked in air and fought to be brave. Let's do this. Great, he said, giving me a thumbs up. He put on a helmet. Turns out I couldn't whop him in the face if I wanted, got behind me and then attached us together. When he stood up again, I stood with him. We walked to the open doorway, leaned forward and oh, wow. I was actually falling. You pushed me out of a plane. I yelled. Brad screamed back at me, you paid me to do that. Oh, right. See? I'd clearly lost my mind. It was lovely to be brave, but that didn't exactly hold weight if I was going to die as a result. Every part of my body tensed and my eyes squeezed shut as we kept falling. The speed was incredible, but the pressure against my face and body felt weird. Like someone had turned on a giant hairdryer and was blowing it up at me. Whoosh! As I squeezed my eyes shut and felt that powerful wind against my body, dark blue eyes appeared in my mind and I heard a familiar voice whisper, "You're missing it, Jen." So, I opened my eyes. The ground appeared before me in a patchwork of greens, light browns, and grays below. The roaring in my ears got louder. What a rush! I looked at everything around me and at the ground below that was coming at me fast. Then, Brad pulled the parachute cord just as I started to wonder who would take my designer shoes when I was dead and gone. The open parachute yanked us upward and I squealed, a short burst of terror and glee. Then we were drifting, the canopy belling out over us. And it happened. I was soaring through the sky with a very nice view. There was nowhere to go but down and I had no control over any of it. I'd made a leap and however it worked out, that's how it would be. I might live and I might not. I could break a leg or end up hanging from a tree branch. Or I could land and be absolutely fine. As I floated through that cold air, it hit me that I wanted to do this again with Dylan. I wanted to go up in the hot air balloon with him. But most of all I wanted to take the greatest adventure of all with him, the adventure of love. Minutes later, we approached the earth. My feet were in a pike position, as instructed, and I felt Brad's feet hit the ground a couple of times before we came to a full stop. We were sitting with our legs out as the canopy fell in front of us. A huge smile spread across my face as Brad detached us, my heart beating fast. A guy ran up. Pics or it didn't happen. I stared at him as he snapped a photo of me. What are you doing? He grinned. Trust me, lady, you want this one way more than the one I got of you in the air. I blinked at him. You took a photo of me in the air? We take pics of everyone. You can buy them. Dylan would never believe I'd done it. I didn't even believe I'd done it and I was sitting there, on the grassy earth, with a parachute of silk collapsed on the ground in front of me. I want all of the pictures you took of me. Or nobody will believe I did this. In the office, I signed a waiver stating I hadn't died or something, got my photos and went to my car. I arranged the photos and stared at them. In the one they'd taken of me in the air I was screaming. Mouth open. Eyes huge behind the goggles. Hands turned upward like I was praying. Laughter hit me and it hit me hard. I laughed and laughed and laughed some more. My side ached. My head ached. And I kept on laughing. I stopped and took out my phone. I took screenshots of the photos and texted them to Dylan. Then I dialed his number and held my breath. The phone rang and rang. Just as I was about to hang up, a woman answered the phone. "Hello," she said. Her voice startled me so much I couldn't speak for a minute. Finally, I stuttered out, "I think I have the wrong number." "Are you looking for Dylan?" I stared at the photos of me skydiving. "Yes, I am." "Oh, sorry. This is his sister, Felicia. He's not here right now. He went on an off-the-grid thing 2 days ago once my husband got home. I'm not sure how long he'll be gone." "Off the grid?" "Oh, no. Dylan was gone, out of touch, and there was no telling when he'd come back. Or if he'd be back. He could be in Iceland for all I knew." I sucked in a breath as hot tears burned my eyes. I'd taken too long. It was too late to apologize and ask for a do-over. I'd ruined what might have been the best thing to ever happen to me. In my heart, I knew there was only one place Dylan would go off the grid right now. He wouldn't have run off to some exotic location when he was in the middle of a business deal, trying to buy that adventure company. I'd hurt him. I knew that. I also needed to make it right. "Okay, Jennifer. You got this." I jumped out of a plane, so rafting down the river and to that little island all by myself should be a piece of cake. Right? Yeah, right. "I'm going to drown," I yelled, a few hours later as my raft headed into a small ripple of water. What could I say? Old habits died a slow death. Of course, I'd picked the raft with a mind of its own. The possessed raft, who wouldn't listen to my paddle, or the new paddle I'd bought for Dylan that I was also trying out in desperation. No way had I picked a normal raft that wanted to glide over the water nice and easy to get me where I was going. I'd never get to Dylan with the way I was flying over these rapids. I'd drown. They'd find me wearing these ugly tan water shoes. And Hannah would speak at my funeral and say, "I told her not to go all by herself." But did she listen to me? No. And she took my favorite hiking shorts without asking. They fit me really well, though, and I wasn't exactly stocked up in outdoors wear. No way. "I refuse to be caught dead in these shoes," I shouted, as more foaming crests met my line of vision. I paddled hard, first right then left. Ugh, which way was the right side to paddle on? It didn't seem to matter much, because I kept flying over the rapids at high speed no matter which side I paddled on. I made another revolution and spotted the island to my right. Finally, calm waters, which lasted a few minutes. I dipped the paddle onto the right side of the raft. And the thing went to the left. That's when I remembered my hasty steering lessons. Paddle on the opposite side of the direction you wish to go. Fine. I paddled hard to the left and the raft went toward the island. Success. Unfortunately, I didn't know how to stop. I'd paused the online how-to video once I figured I had the gist. This is why my raft slammed up onto the sand unceremoniously with a lurch and a short scream from me. Dylan appeared in the distance, stepping out from behind a row of trees. He wore a short-sleeved shirt and swim trunks. I jumped off the raft. Then I froze. He stepped toward me. "What are you doing here? Are you all right?" "Me? Oh, I'm fine," I said, yanking at the hem of Hannah's shirt that I also borrowed without asking permission first. "I, called your cell phone and talked to Felicia." His eyebrows rose. "You did?" I nodded, wondering which seemed to surprise him more. "She said you'd gone off the grid and I figured you might have come here." "Good guess," he said, his facial expression blank. Oh, this was going to be harder than I thought. Then I remembered. "I brought you something," I said. He came over, wearing a quizzical look as I bent over the raft and pulled out a paddle. "This is for you," I said, holding the paddle out and then realizing I was holding a paddle with a pink stripe on it. The one I'd bought in honor of my new investor. "Hang on." As I dropped my paddle back into the raft, the water seemed to take hold of the raft and pull it backward. So I leaned over and pulled the raft further up the shore until it stayed in place. If it were possessed, then I think I'd finally tamed it. "You only let me supervise the first time the raft came ashore," I said, seeing if I could crack a smile out of him. "Nope. Nothing." I found the correct paddle, which was an upgraded paddle of the one I'd lost on our initial rafting trip. I held it out to him. "This is for you." "Thanks." He took the paddle and squinted at it. "You didn't have to do that." "I did lose your first one," I said, shrugging and hoping for a smile. "No such luck. You came all the way out here to give me a paddle?" Okay, this was it. I sucked in a breath. "Well, that's a great excuse, but no. I had to come see you. Because I need to tell you something." His gaze fastened on my face. "I'm listening." "I'm sorry for what happened that day by the hot air balloon," I said, squinting up at him. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. You've taught me so much about the kind of life I want to have." He kept his gaze on mine and I took that as a good sign. I mean, he hadn't run off yelling at me to go away. I'd take what I could get at this point. "Then why did you break this off?" My throat tightened. The truth is I was scared of getting hurt. While trying to protect my heart and keep it safe, I ended up hurting you and myself in the process. He glanced at the ground for a moment, before looking at me again. I can relate to feeling scared. My mouth dropped open. "You? I don't think so. You're not scared of anything." He gave a small laugh. "You remember our sushi date?" I nodded. "You ran out because Felicia was in the hospital." "Yeah, that's why I left," he said, shaking his head and then raking a hand through his hair. He let out an audible sigh. "But that's not why I didn't call you for a few days." "Oh, right. I remembered that. You didn't call me because you were scared?" He nodded. "You asked me about if I ever wanted to settle down, which was something I hadn't thought about or wanted until I met you." It threw me. "In a good way?" I asked. "In the best way." The corners of his mouth tipped up and he reached for my hand, rubbing my palm. I just acted dumb for a couple of days until I realized that. My belly did a little flip as I realized his feelings for me hadn't changed. "So, you knew I'd be here?" he asked. My eyes watered, I hoped. He laced his fingers through mine. "I'm glad you came." "Me, too," I said, smiling up at him and feeling like my insides glowed. "Look, Dylan, I know we've already had a do-over, and third chances aren't really a saying. But to prove that you and I are worth another chance, I did something to prove to you I wasn't scared to take chances." His eyebrows came together. "What did you do?" "I went skydiving." "Okay, not on my own, it was tandem. But, still. I gave the okay for us to jump out of the plane. I just kind of went along for the ride. The fall. You know what I mean." His left eyebrow arced upward. "Come again?" I shrugged. "First, I went skydiving. Then I rafted out here by myself." Dylan gave me a wide smile. "That second one wasn't safe, so I'll have to scold you about that later." I felt a spark of hope. "You know what else I did? You stood up to your investor?" Joy exploded inside me as I nodded. I risked losing everything and got exactly what I needed. Just like I took a risk coming down the river, because what I really need is you. He slipped his arms around my waist and pulled me against him. You want a do-over? I gave him a look. Yes, and I hope we won't need another one after this. If we do, then I'm all in, he said, smiling. Me, too, I said. Then I kissed him, forgetting about everything else I wanted to say. Letting the kiss say it all for me again and again and again. He pulled back after a moment. Jen? I blinked, coming out of my haze. Yeah. Your raft is floating away, he said. I twisted my head to look. Sure enough, the raft was heading toward the center of the river. Oh, no. Lesson number 1. That's why you should tie it off, he said, pressing his lips to mine. Yeah, I guess so, I said, giggling against his mouth. Then I laced my arms around his neck and we were kissing again, so the raft was forgotten for a long time. I was getting ready to break camp and go back, anyway. I don't want to find out I'm an uncle from a phone call. Maybe we can grab your raft on the way back in. I hope so. It's a rental. He chuckled. We need to get you one of your own, eventually. My chest went light. There was a we, and that was what mattered. Dylan showed me how to help get the tent down and the things packed. We made sure the fire was out and then I took up a spot on his raft behind him. He picked up his new paddle and turned to me. You know what you should design next? What? Some cute water shoes. I sputtered laughter. Are you ready for this? He asked. Yes, I'm ready, I said, smiling up at him. Finally, I'd met the person who had me ready for love and adventure. Together, we shot away from the far side of the island and into the rapids. Instead of fearing for my life, I laughed hard with Dylan, flying fast down the river and into our future. The end. If you enjoyed spending time with these characters, be sure to read Hannah's story in the Date Next Door, Do-Over Date series, Book 3. You have been listening to the Double Date Disaster, Do-Over Date series, Book 2, by Susan Hatler, copyright 2019 by Susan Hatler, audiobook copyright 2023 by Susan Hatler. Susan Hatler is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author who writes humorous and emotional women's fiction and young adult novels. Many of Susan's books have been translated into German, Spanish, French, and Italian. A natural optimist, she believes life is amazing, people are fascinating, and imagination is endless. She loves spending time with her characters and hopes you do, too.